Yes, sir.
I want to welcome you to the May 18th, 2020 meeting of the Abingdon Town Council. I want to thank you all for being in attendance. We appreciate you showing up for this meeting. Kim, would you call a roll, please?
Mr. Bradley.
I see him mouthing it.
He's here and there.
Kim, did you see his mouth move?
Now I'm here.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mr. Bradley.
Now I'm here.
Ms. Quetch. Here. Mr. Webb.
Here.
Ms. Patterson.
Here.
Mayor Craig.
Here.
Let me say something. just
We have a
briefly.
statement from the town attorney.
Thank you, Mayor. The legislature recently passed amendments to the budget that allow electronic meetings during the emergency. So we are meeting during the COVID-19 emergency in part by electronic communication means, by WebEx, Jim?
WebEx, correct.
WebEx that Mr. Bradley is communicating through, and by that electronic communication means.
Thank you. Mr. Webb will lead us in the pledge to the flag.
I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, the first item on the agenda is public comments.
No. Approval of the agenda.
Oh, I'm sorry. Gosh, I messed up that. I'm sorry, the first item on the agenda is approval of the agenda. Is there a motion that we approve the agenda?
Mayor Craig, I'd like to make a motion to amend the agenda. In my motion, just 1 second. I've got it right here, I'm sorry, I had to, there we go. I would like to make a motion to amend the agenda, and I'd like to add, to put this item after the approval of the minutes. This item is a discussion by the full council of specific line items presented in the draft budget I received last week and the amendments sent out to council Friday. The reason for my request is that our normal budget process, including our discussion for the budget is open, in open public meetings, includes discussion of the draft budget and line item format to allow council member input and suggested changes based on citizen input to us individually and our own research and
Cindy,
review
let me
of
interrupt
town
you.
properties and needs.
Would you let us make the motion and then you can tell us?
Sure, yeah.
State the motion again, please.
I'd like to make a motion to amend the agenda, and I'd like to add to put this item after the approval of the minutes.
And what is your motion?
The motion is, well, that was my paragraph. It's
A
an-
paragraph, we can't have a paragraph.
The
as
item is a
motion.
discussion about this full council of specific line items presented in the draft budget.
Okay. All right, the motion, you have the motion, Cindy? Kim? Yeah. Motion by Ms. Patterson to amend the agenda to include a discussion of the specific items in the line item
In
budget.
the line item budget.
Okay. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
A second by Mr. Bradley. Any discussion?
Well, I'd like to say that, to finish my motion, the reason for my request is that our normal budget process, including our discussion for the budget in the open meeting, includes discussion of draft budget and line item format to allow council members' input and suggested changes based on citizen input to us individually and our own research and review of the town priorities and needs. We certainly appreciate the groundwork the Finance Committee and draft produced by our town manager, Brenda and Stephanie. The point is that where we always have open public discussion and consideration for changes to the draft, improvements, and critical council member input by each elected official, perhaps inadvertently the step has not been taken and needs to be taken tonight prior to any first reading, so we as a council can make necessary changes and compromises, especially in the midst of the crisis that we're in. I recognize that COVID-19 has delayed our normal process, But we cannot rush into this draft budget merely moving from draft to first reading. We must do our due diligence to listen to all council members and allow the citizens' input.
Okay.
And I want to say we need to keep open transparency.
Any other discussion? Kim, call the roll, please.
Mr. Bradley? Is it up? Ms. Quetch?
Nay.
Mr. Webb?
Nay.
Ms. Patterson?
Aye.
Mayor Craig?
No.
They have to take a motion to approve the agenda.
So I would move to approve the agenda as already drafted.
I'll second that.
Motion by Mr. Webb to approve the agenda as presented, second by Ms. Quetch. Any discussion?
I think that we should have done this, but because of open transparency. I will go ahead and expound on this. Based on the information that I have been given, I did some research, and there's several finance committees in the state of Virginia. And I found that Gate City, Smithfield, and Warrenton has finance committees. And based on our information that Mr. Morani has provided for us in our budget, it said the Finance Committee has reviewed every department line item's budget through a process of department head meetings. And the dates were March 31st and April the 9th. It was given on April 2020. And then it was added later on our ordinance that's coming up, February 19th, 2020. To my knowledge, I don't think there's been any video of the department head meetings. This is a big portion of our budget, and I feel like it should have been videoed. I feel like that there should have been meeting minutes, and I haven't been presented any. If anybody wants to tell me where the videos are, I'd appreciate it. And right here in the Gate City information that I discovered, it says that the Finance Committee receives budgets from the town manager, analyzes them, holds public hearings where the department heads and the public can testify, and subsequently presents a balanced budget to the town council for adoption. As far as I know, that didn't take place, so I stand for open transparency, and I think that we should have had some transparent, open to the public meetings on the department head meetings, and that was not done to my knowledge.
Any other discussion? My understanding of the budget process is that we, and this is the first year we've had it, so maybe we need to learn from something, I don't know. But my understanding of the process is that we'd have a budget committee, and they would work with the staff to present us tonight with a budget. And I believe the staff has done a good job in presenting us with the budget. It's been advertised or posted on our website. We'll have plenty of opportunity. This is just the first reading, and it's for us to receive information from the staff, and it's for us to receive input from the public. There will be ample opportunity to amend the budget as needed. The budget will, as I understand it, and Jimmy, correct me if I'm wrong, we will have a line item budget in a book prior to the second reading, is that correct?
I don't know how we've done that in the past. I can if you need me to.
Yeah,
As far as the book is concerned, it's my understanding that that book was published after we adopted the budget, but
No,
what,
we had a draft.
we did have a draft before, okay.
Yeah.
But that can be done prior to adoption.
Yeah.
But
So we'll have-
because we might have some changes to it, that's why we didn't want to do
So
that
we'll
right now.
have ample opportunity to look at our line item budget and discuss it completely prior to the next meeting, and
Well, keep in mind, the line items that would be in that book you already have, and they were on the website. The difference is they're just not in a book form. I don't, it's just in a different format, so
Okay.
But there's all kinds of questions that, and I gave you some last
Yeah.
week, and I don't think you had time to answer them all on email because I didn't get the email back from you.
Okay.
There's a lot of questions that I have, and we just really hadn't had the time to do a work session with discussion. After all, the whole council is responsible for this budget. It's not just a special force. The recommendations by the finance committee, I recognize, but it's up to the entire council to approve this budget, make cuts, whatever we need to do. And so, I don't understand some of this language in here, like capital outlay. There's no description of what this capital outlay is, and there's several pages of this. And then there's other questions. I have a
Okay.
lot of questions.
Procedurally, I think we're talking about approving the agenda. So
Yeah.
I think there's gonna be some discussion by Mr. Morandy later, but
Okay,
I
this
think
will.
we've gone way far
Yeah, I
afield.
think so, too.
Well, this will prelude, about the ordinance when it comes up here in a few minutes.
Fine.
Okay.
Just keep us on track.
Okay, any further discussion? Kim, call the roll, please.
Mr. Bradley?
Aye.
Ms. Quetch?
Aye.
Mr. Webb?
Aye.
Ms. Patterson?
Nay.
And Mayor Craig?
Aye. The next item on the agenda is approval of the minutes. Are there any corrections to the minutes? We don't have any public comments.
No.
Any corrections to the minutes? Is there a motion we approve the minutes?
I so move.
I'll second that.
Motion by Mr. Webb to approve the minutes of the April 20th, 2020 regular meeting, second by Ms. Quetch. Any discussion? Kim, call roll, please.
Mr. Bradley?
Aye.
Ms. Quetch?
Aye.
Mr. Webb?
Aye.
Ms. Patterson?
I am saying,
Aye. The next item on the agenda is,
Wait, did we not do public comments?
she said we didn't have any.
No, I didn't.
Oh.
I misunderstood you. I thought you said, was there any other comments? I'm sorry.
Oh, I said,
Mayor Craig,
I
I'm
thought you
sorry.
said there were any public.
Now
I'm
we gotta
sorry.
start the
I
meeting
thought you
all
said
over
any
again.
further comments. I'm so sorry.
All right, I'm sorry. Then we'll take up the public comments now.
We approved the minutes and everything, right, we're good.
Yeah.
We approved.
I'm so sorry.
That's okay.
I thought we were still discussing the motion.
Okay, we're open to public comments now, you can bring the first person.
I was trying to make sure Al was still in here.
Okay.
Good evening. I'm Michael Henningsen. Thank you, Mayor Craig and the council. I'm a fairly new Abingdon resident. I have a business here conducting living history tours. I teach music and have been part of the community for about 5 years. It was a visit to the muster grounds that actually got me to fall in love with Abingdon, seeing a painting of the Lord Dunmore, and he was a historical character that I had never heard of. But tonight, I come to you as a voice from the grave. I don't normally dress like this. Tonight, I come to you as the voice of Rufus Soule, a name that most of you have not heard of, and yet Rufus Soule operated the finest establishment in Southwest Virginia, just a few blocks down the road, from 1803 to 1835. His tavern was one of the best. One of the things that set his tavern apart was a full-time dance instructor that introduced couples dancing in the formation of a square. According to Susan Spalding, a dance history instructor from ETSU, we can attribute modern square dancing to a tavern in Abingdon, Virginia, that had a full-time dance instructor. You see, it's stories like that of history that aren't often told. And it is our history that makes us unique. It's the history of Abingdon. Characters like Charles Cummings, Low Brown, the Campbells, I can't even think of all of the names at the moment, but it is the story of Abingdon that draws people to Abingdon. For Rufus Soule, it was a center for tourism. His tavern hosted people on their discovery across the Wilderness Trail. Abingdon has a long history of hospitality, and that historic vision of tourism needs to be promoted and needs to be encouraged, especially during times like now where we're having economic crunches. Rufus Soule saw economic difficulties during his time. The War of 1812 took many of the young men, and there were plagues and pandemics during his time. And yet Abingdon remained a center of hospitality to tourists and visitors. And so I come tonight as a private citizen, but also one of the voices of Abingdon's past, to challenge, to suggest, to invite you council members, Mayor Craig, in your deliberations to be more creative about how we can engage these historic properties, to look at them not as just a cost center, but to be able to capitalize on them, to draw the tourists in that eat at Pal's, that eat at other places, that raise those revenue dollars. Rather than shut down, I challenge you to encourage and look at the budget again for tourism, especially
Sir,
relating to
I'm
history.
I'm sorry. I didn't, we're operating electronically tonight, and we're having to adjust to that. We didn't advise you, but public comments are limited to 3 minutes, and your time was up. But please wrap it up if you don't mind.
I was in the process of doing just exactly that.
Okay.
My challenge to you, my invitation, my desire, as one who has 4 children buried in Sinking Spring Cemetery, as a voice from the past, to consider engaging that past to reestablish the present and to build the future. Because one of the things that does not change, tobacco changes, coal changes, healthcare changes, but our history does not. And if we can capitalize on our history, we can build an economic engine of tourism based on that history. Thank you very much for your
Thank
time.
you, sir. I really admire your dress.
Thank you. I made most of it myself,
That's great.
Wow.
Are you kidding?
including the shoes.
That's great.
Oh, my gosh.
Thank you, Mr. Henningsen.
Thank you, Ms. Patterson.
I think we have 3, I think is what Tanya said.
Okay,
Good
next
evening, Town
speaker is
Council.
Katie Fram.
Good evening. Can you hear me through my mask?
Barely.
Barely. Good evening, my name is Katie Brown. I reside at 169 East Main Street, and I'm the producing artistic director of Barter Theater. I want to thank you for your support in the past, and I come to you now to say that your support of Barter Theater right now has never been more important or necessary. As I conveyed to you all at the town budget hearing, Barter was well on its way to a strong recovery this spring. We had a new cash flow management system, and ticket sales and donations were all at or above our projections. COVID has radically changed the landscape for Barter and for performing arts across the nation and across the world. We had to close our doors and limit all of our cash outlays immediately. And as we told you at that time, we had to make the difficult choice to furlough 93 employees. But we're keeping them close. Some of them are still in our housing, those that needed it. We're assisting with their health insurance, and some of them are volunteering, making masks for healthcare workers, and also taking part in fundraising initiatives. These 93 people have made Abingdon their home. They pay taxes here, many of them own property here, and we want to keep them here. If they drift away, it will be extremely difficult to fire the theater up again quickly. Their skills and talents are rare, and we need them and their commitment to Abingdon to be able to help restart Abingdon's tourism economy. We want to bring back the 145,000 people that come through Barter's doors each year, and to do that, we need your help. This is the time to ensure that Barter is here in the future to bring those people to town. We're doing everything in our power to make sure that Barter will be here in the future. We've transitioned some of our programming to streaming. For example, we just served over 3,000 students with Macbeth online, more than we could have fit into the theater when we were doing it live. Projects like this aren't generating significant revenue for theaters anywhere right now, but they're an important part of keeping Barter's community of patrons together. We're applying for loans and grants. We're not sure exactly what we will receive yet. We are fundraising. We will continue to fundraise throughout the duration. We have cut as many costs as we can and still function at this level. The paperwork we submitted to you all outlines our monthly fixed costs and the measures we've taken to reduce them by 74%. Our job right now is to find a way to restart, a safe way to restart, and we're deep in the planning process right now. With social distancing, Barter can only use a small portion of its seats, not enough seats to fund a full production. So being inside the theater is difficult at this time, but we're looking at other options, and we plan to have word out to the community in the coming weeks about what our season might be able to be. Barter wants to be able to help bringing more people to restaurants, shops, and other businesses in town, and every day comes down to two priorities. One, protect the health and safety of Barter's employees, volunteers, patrons, and the community, and two, ensure that Barter Theater is here to serve this community for years to come. We will do those two things, and we need your support to do it. Thank you.
Thank you, Katie.
Thank you, Katie.
And this next speaker is Blake Baker. Mr. Baker, would you state your name and address, and please limit your comments to 3 minutes, please.
I'll do my best, sir.
There's a time.
The red light will go off when you 3 minutes is up.
Okay. My name is Blake Baker, and I live at 239 Valley Street here in Abingdon. And my wife and I, Kristen, owned and operated the Baker Homestead Goat Dairy out by the lake for the last 10 years. We sold the farm, moved down to town, and we recently purchased a house at 313 Tanner with the intent for short-term rental from Robin and D.R. Mullins. And we applied for a business license to run the operation there and was told that we could not get a license for a short-term rental, that it wasn't zoned for a short-term rental. In doing my research on the zone, and it looked like we were in B2, and it starts right there on the corner, and B1 is from the park all the way from the railroad tracks up to Trooper's Alley and almost up to White Birch, not quite. But it looks like both B2 and B1, neither are zoned for short-term rental. So it seems to me the most expeditious fix to our problem, which the reason we bought the property was for an investment opportunity that we could make with a short-term rental, is to add a not a zoning change by right, but by special request permit. And I would ask that you guys would consider and approve that short-term rental be added as a special use permit to B1 and B2, because this not only affects the property that we just bought, but many other properties in those two zones that currently do operate as a short-term rental, which either are operating unbeknownst to them in illegal status.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Baker, I believe this is a matter for the Planning Commission.
It
I think
is.
they have to act on special use permits. I'm not sure, do they have the authority, Jimmy, to issue the permit, or do
It would take a zoning change, Mayor. It's something that can be discussed at the Planning Commission meeting. As we recall last year when we were going through another zoning issue regarding the courthouse, we explained that a zoning text amendment can be initiated by either the council or the Planning Commission. I think in this, and that's just to initiate it, to present it. I think in this instance, it's probably best to have it discussed at the Planning Commission first, provide some background, and I think at that point, I would recommend that we have the Planning Commission initiate that text amendment if we're going to do one, so.
Okay.
I think it's got to be
Is that
just,
with the council in agreement on that? Then Do you know, Jimmy, can you tell him when the planning commission?
There's a planning commission meeting. It wouldn't be a public hearing because we have limits on how we can do. June 1st is the next planning commission meeting. They are going to do that meeting electronically, but we are going to allow public participation. I'll have Jason get a hold of you, Blake, and let you know how you could participate in that meeting, and it could be discussed as an agenda item under new business. There just might not be, if there's any action that comes out of that meeting, any initiated zoning text amendment, then it would have to take another action, a public hearing and whatnot. But I'd say we'd let the planning commission discuss it and decide how to proceed.
Thanks, Mayor Craig.
Okay.
Thanks, Jimmy.
All right.
So if I'm not wrong, it's got to be discussed over the course of 2 planning commission meetings and then voted on by you guys at the council to pass?
It has to at least involve a public hearing, Blake. More than likely in this instance, it probably will because we've eclipsed the deadline for the public hearing requirements for the planning commission. So more than likely what will happen is if the planning commission decides to move forward with it, then it would go before, it would be a public hearing at the planning commission, and then it would come to the council.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Baker.
Okay. That's all of our speakers, is it not?
Can. I do, okay.
Is that all of our speakers?
Yes, I was gonna check on the plan for the next map.
For open comment, yeah. I think it was.
And no one signed up for the budget.
That was everything. Okay. We'll stop.
The next item on the agenda is public hearing and first reading an ordinance of the council for the town of Abingdon, Virginia, proposing a budget for the town of Abingdon, Virginia, and to make appropriation for the current expenses of the town, and to fix a tax rate upon real and personal property, to fix all other local tax rates and fees and rates on utility services for the fiscal year beginning July 1st, 2020. Mr. Moran.
Okay, Mayor and Council, I think the format we're going to follow here is I'm going to go ahead and give the presentation, and then I believe, Mayor, I think you'll open up the public hearing, and then that's when you guys can have discussion or do the first reading. Is that correct, how we want to do that?
Yeah,
Okay.
That will be the first reading, yes.
Okay, well, you'll go through your procedural comments, whatever. Okay, so right now, before I give the presentation, I just wanted to preface, I came here last May, and when I came on board, there was discussion regarding the creation of a finance committee. And I know before I got here, there was some very, very long budget work sessions. I think there were 2, and they were like 4 or 5 hours each. And my the feedback that I got from the council and the establishment of the finance committee was to not have the entire council have to go through every single individual line item in the budget, and that was why they created the finance committee, which it was going to be comprised of, which they did, of 2 council members and the town manager. And yes, we did obviously bring staff in as these line items, as we reviewed these line items. So what the budget ordinance is that you're seeing tonight on the agenda is just a summary of all of those line items put together. That is the statutorily required budget document that has to be approved by the council, and this is what is advertised. The meat and potatoes is what's in this budget document, the line item budget. And just so you're aware, before we went to Finance Committee, we did have some personnel changes. We did change the software program that we were using. So we've been, and we had COVID that happened. So as far as the detail that you're seeing now, I expect it will probably improve next year, but because of all those limitations, I think what we have is still pretty detailed, but as far as an actual description of each individual line item, I will take feedback from the council how detailed they want that budget document to me. But based on what we came up with at the Finance Committee, we felt like this was at least appropriate to present to the full council. So I'm going to go ahead and start the presentation, and if anybody has a question on any individual slide, please feel free to interject, and I'll try to respond accordingly. And I do have Stephanie Davis on the line as well, so if something comes up and there's a question I want to defer to her, I'll do that, or if she wants to make a comment, Stephanie, feel free to jump in. I'll try to pause at the end of each slide.
I'd like to point out that Stephanie did an excellent job presenting it
Right, I think so,
to
yeah.
begin with. I thought she did an excellent job.
Yeah, and you remember the last presentation that we had at the April 20th meeting, was more on the fund reconciliation, and it was more accounting-based. This is going to be more department-based,
Yes.
because since we're getting into that, as far as policy, we're kind of making it into the policy decision realm. I figured that'd be something that you guys would want to hear at this stage, and the public would probably want to hear. But there's going to be some information here that was also presented at the last meeting as well, so
Yes.
especially at the beginning. But I think both presentations combined kind of gives you a full picture of where we're at on the accounting side and then on the departmental side.
I want
I
to say
agree.
that I don't think there's any question that it was a nice presentation. That's not the question. Question is, and I just want to say this, we need to have more discussion, and Mayor Craig said, and I've got a question myself, is when are we going to be able to go over the line items that were recommended, and get the answers to our questions? So I need that question answered.
Let me say something. I have had all my questions answered by the staff. You may be, Cindy, you may be requiring more detailed explanation than other council members require. And I think that's one of the reasons we had a budget committee, is that we can talk to individual members of the budget committee or to the staff about any questions we have, and I've been able to get my answers. So,
Well, I've asked staff as well, and I haven't been able to get all my answers, and
Well-
I don't know how we can make recommendations for possibly additional cuts if we don't understand, if we don't have all the information. And this was given to us in regards to probably COVID, and they were kind of like, we just got this last week. And so we get kind of bits and pieces of things at different times. So we still have I still have questions about this. So I just
Okay,
want that
okay.
clear to the council.
Well, the budget was
I think that's
presented on the
good enough.
20th.
Yeah, the
I
20th
think we
of
need to
April.
separate the council from individual members, because all I'm saying is that I don't have a problem with what's going on, and I've been able to get all mine.
Well, this is dated 4/20.
4/20, yeah.
Well, I didn't mean to say last week, but a little while ago.
Well, remember that,
Maybe you should meet with Jimmy if.
Yeah.
if
I don't
you-
mind meeting with individual
I'm
council
sure the
members about the
questions
budget, or if
will
you
be
call, I mean, and you did send me an email, I think, on Friday. I've been able to answer some of those questions, but I haven't been able to answer all of them.
Right.
But-
I also would like to say, there's nothing hidden, there's no hidden agenda here. It's all open, and we are being transparent. So
Well, you need to have it on
Yeah.
video, and you need to have it on, your minutes and things like that, though,
We-
because
we-
and you need to invite the public.
we do not have minutes for our finance committee.
How many minutes did Donna and Derek attend? I mean, meetings did they attend? Because I've got two different.
Okay, I'm just going to make this statement. I'm
Okay,
going
go
to be
ahead.
really, because I got to get into this presentation.
Go
The
ahead.
Finance Committee, my understanding, was set up
Yes.
sort of like as a quasi-staff entity. It's not subject to the Open Meetings Act. It is two council members, the town manager, and we bring in staff to consult on specific issues. It was my understanding it was never intended to be an open meeting. I'm not saying it can't be an open meeting, but if you open it to one person, then anybody can come in, and then there becomes issues that we might need to discuss that are personnel related, that are maybe even future, or like we don't know what's going to happen with a potential restructuring, and we were doing a lot of that this session. I'm not saying we're not trying to be transparent, but there's some things that you need to, that are business decisions that I think are better discussed internally, and I believe that's the purpose of that finance committee. If otherwise, why don't we just go back to the full work session that we had before, and there's really no reason to have the finance committee. That's just my expectation of what that was about.
The finance committee is really not any different than any other committee that council members are on, and those committees decide how they want to operate, and the
Well-
council doesn't give them instructions.
Well, I think the difference is, there are some that are advisory in nature that have public members. This is internal. These are not people from the public that we've invited. These are,
But I was talking about the.
yeah. For instance,
Yeah,
like
but we
these
should
advisory
invite the
committees.
public.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but that's not my understanding of how the committee structure was set up.
I think that the finance committee were the legs, my understanding, for the council to make recommendations, but that doesn't take away the fact that this council in general, all of us are responsible for this budget. And if I have questions, then I'm gonna ask them, and I
And we
expect the
want your
answers.
questions answered.
Yeah.
We want to answer your
Yeah.
questions.
And there's no reason to, we
Yeah.
can answer some of those questions
Yeah.
tonight if you have questions.
Yeah, I
This is what
think
we're here
there's a
for.
lot going to be answered in what he presents tonight.
But, I mean, my point is, if you're going to open it to the public, we might as well just have all the council members on it. And I'm fine with that, that's what you got to do. I will work under whatever direction the council gives me. But when they set up the finance committee, it was intended to be an internal discussion with staff and other financial matters, sort of now, when we have like Recreation Advisory Committee, those are public advisory boards, we have public members. The Infrastructure Committee, we have public members. Finance Committee are 2 council members and the town manager, and it is strictly internal. It is not something that we open up to the public. If you want to do that with the budget, then we just need to invite everybody and have all the council members on it.
Oh, I like that
So,
idea,
okay.
because it's much more transparent.
Yeah.
Well, Cindy, you voted for the budget committee.
But yes, I know that,
Oh,
Mr.
okay,
Craig.
all right.
However, things change whenever it wasn't as transparent as what I thought it was gonna be.
Okay.
Okay, I think that's a fair statement.
I don't think it's fair for a committee that we created for you to accuse us of being non-transparent. That doesn't, I mean, that's your opinion, that's fine, but the rest of us are fine with it. I just don't understand why all of a sudden it's not transparent.
Because I wasn't aware it wasn't gonna be videoed, there was no minutes. I mean,
I mean,
you know, this.
that's
this
fine that
is-
you want that,
but
but that
we-
doesn't mean we have to do everything you want, Cindy. I mean, just understand.
Well, I
that
think it's what the public wants, you better wanna.
I have not had a
Yeah, I
single
haven't
person
had-
approach me and tell me that I haven't been
Hold on,
transparent.
hold on.
I'm sorry, but it's
My phone's been
offensive.
ringing off the hook.
Yeah, please,
Okay.
tell me who they are, please.
Let's drop all of this and get on with your presentation, Jimmy.
Okay.
The budget committee's been established and the process has been established, so.
Okay, so the first slide is about the budget. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
The budget development process, this was something we covered at the last meeting, the last presentation. We had meetings with the Finance Committee. We presented a draft of the proposed budget on April 20th. What you got and what was posted on the website was really a streamlined version, so it was actually a more summarized version of what you got on April 20th. All the figures were exactly the same. It was just in a different format. It was a little bit easier to read. We felt like, because it had not been put on the website, we wanted to make it as easier to understand as possible, so that's why we revised the format to put it on the website about 10 days ago. After tonight's public hearing, we'll have a first reading, and then a second reading and an adoption of the budget will be scheduled for June 15th. The budget is effective July 1st through June 30th. That's the fiscal year. The key priorities: protect and maintain the town's fund balances, obviously maintaining a minimum $5 million balance in the general fund. Compliance with this policy ensures sufficient cash flow and reserves for town operations. Another key priority in putting together this budget is to focus on essential services. Also recognize and address revenue and expenditure impacts from COVID-19, obviously with the reduction in meals and lodging. And we fully intend to, hopefully, be in a position to make adjustments to the adopted budget after it's approved later in the fiscal year. One thing that we've discussed, we discussed at the meeting on the 20th about the fact that this is a structurally enhanced budget. In addition to the expenditure reductions, we've restructured the budget, we feel, to actually provide better transparency. So we have funds dedicated for capital improvements and for street maintenance and a segregated budget for debt service. We feel like this will be easier to track. So I think after we get beyond this year, it will, when you look at next year's budget, when we prepare the previous years, right now, they're not going to coincide. So if I were to print in our financial software program what was spent the previous year, with the creation of these two funds and consolidating budgets, what we're going to get to in a second, it's not going to make any sense. So that's why we tried to make it as simple as possible this year as far as how the budget was presented, because the previous years are not going to correspond because we've moved funds around and combined departments. So that's strictly being done for efficiency purposes, and I think will allow long-term better transparency. Here are the proposed revenues as we presented at the last meeting. It does show a total of total general fund $19,360,462, and then wastewater fund, 4.8 million approximately. And then the next page is the general revenue fund. General fund revenue. We've got, obviously, a significant decrease from last fiscal year based on our revenue projections. Some of this is due to the fact that we had some grant-funded projects that were coming off the books, so that is somewhat related to that large number, but it's not, it's probably somewhere between 700,000 or 800,000. We had a creeper trail project that we did, so not entirely due to the projected decrease in revenues as far as the sales taxes are concerned. Some of them were as a result of the loss of grant projects or funds for grant projects. COVID adjustments you see on the right, as we presented at the last at the April meeting, we're still projecting, conservatively 35% reduction in meals and lodging taxes. We are monitoring those every month to see where we're at. I don't think we'll really have a clear picture of this until we hit probably the first quarter of the fiscal year, because the next couple of months are going to be really rough with the shutdown in April and most of May. So until we get in July, we really won't know what the true revenue impact will be to those two revenue streams. Meals and lodging taxes. There's some up-to-date information I put in here. Just so everybody knows, the meals and lodging taxes last year did comprise approximately 28% of the general fund revenue. That is exclusive of grant proceeds. And due to COVID, we are projecting, as I said, a 35% reduction in these taxes, which amounts to a loss of projected revenue of over $1.4 million. Just what we got in April, which would be for March, the month of March, the business sales in March, we were down 31% and 52% for meals and lodging taxes, respectively, compared to the same month in the previous year. And because those reflect March sales, you remember about 3 weeks in March we were open. I mean, it started to taper down, I think, and slowed down a bit towards the late part of the month, but there was no shutdown. People were still, doing their normal day-to-day activities. When we start getting revenue in at the end of this month, or May 20th is the first day of the meals and lodging taxes are due, we'll really be able to get a good handle on what that true effect of the stay-at-home order was and the business closure was. So we'll be looking at that very closely, and I'll definitely be able to make an update on that at the next meeting. Here are the expenditures. As you can see, we did propose a balanced budget. The expenditures for both funds equal the same as we reviewed at the last meeting. So I'm going to get into the current fiscal year budget reductions that were made. In late March, we initiated reductions to the current budget, and this included me putting a hold on all non-essential purchases and travel, as well as a reduction in workforce by laying off part-time employees at the Coombs Center and the tourism department. In late April, the town laid off a total of 13 full-time employees in the Coombs Recreation Center and tourism department. In total, the workforce reductions amount to approximately $112,000 and decreased general fund expenditures for the remainder of the fiscal year. The refilling of these positions in the next fiscal year will be dependent on the town's financial situation and operational needs. I think it's important that we enter the next fiscal year with a balanced budget. The need to reduce expenditures, including the workforce reductions, was necessary in order to maintain our financial health as we wound down to the end of the fiscal year. So, any questions on that? Yeah, I didn't really pause like I said I was going to pause.
Can I make a?
I'm sorry.
I did have someone reach out to
Okay.
me. There was a vicious rumor going around about the Coombs Center not reopening, and I think this is a good point to plug in there, that all of those employees we're going to bring back as quickly as possible, and as soon as the budget allows. I mean, that's always been the plan. There's nobody closing the Coombs Center. And I think it's important to reiterate that because of the phasing the governor has implemented, we can't just open the Coombs Center on a dime and replug those employees back in. Just to clarify.
We don't plan to permanently close the Coombs Center, I can tell you that. That'll probably be the last town facility to reopen,
Right.
obviously. I will probably cover that in a little bit more detail, Derek, when we get to that department page and tell you what we think might be realistic. But if we do reopen, we'd like to bring, people back as fast as we can, but it'll probably be done in phases as the health and safety allows for the employees and customers, so.
Are the outdoor activities still going on at the Coombs Center at this time?
No, not right now.
Okay.
No, there's no organized activities going on at the Coombs Center right now.
Will there be before it reopens in totally, or?
That's yet to be determined. I think the social distancing aspect of the governor's order will dictate some of that. The gatherings, like for instance, the gymnasium, or I'm sorry, like the fitness area. You can't, it's going to be hard to socially distance people if they're on two different pieces of exercise equipment. So we might have to wait until we move to phase 3. It's going to be I think a fluid situation, but I don't know if we'll be in a situation to open before phase 2 based on the social distancing requirements. But we'll address that. I'll address that later. But I have been communicating with Melisha and Jennifer about what their plan is to reopen, and if we do it in phases, how that will happen.
I was just referring only to outdoor activities.
Outdoor activities, we haven't had a discussion about any organized events yet. I imagine that if it's an outdoor activity, that will likely happen before anything inside, like the fitness center or anything like that.
I also got,
Yeah.
I told you about the email that I got about the
Right.
Coombs Center reopening, so that was another rumor
Yeah.
I heard as well.
Yeah, no, we don't plan to.
Talk about rumors.
Yeah, that's not a plan. I mean, I think the Coombs Center is an asset to the community, and I think we've made a lot of investments there. So, general fund departments. Just kind of a summary of the various departments in the general fund, just to start us off. So we're going to be talking about those departments' budgets. So this is where I wanted to start because it was probably the one area that we had the most consolidation with. And previously, one of the things that I sat down with, when I first got here, I sat down with our finance director and I questioned why we had so many different budgets. We had, and then when we get into finance, I explained to them that I wanted to consolidate this. We had a town council budget, we had a town manager budget, we had an HR budget, we had a legal budget. And really, a lot of those are town administration issues. And I know why we had a legal budget, because at one time we had an in-house attorney. But what I did was, for the purpose of this presentation, I combined all those. And what you're going to see in the theme in some of these slides is I very meticulously tried to combine these so they're not going to exactly correspond directly with what you see in the budget book, because we have different departments that are spread out all over. Like you might have the Parks and Recreation Department, but they might have in our financial accounting program 8 different separate budgets, like, Latcher Field or what's the other one I'm thinking? The cemetery, So I combined all those and gave it an aggregate number, so okay, all the budgets that the Parks Department manages, or all the budgets that Public Works manage, here's the total number. Because really that's the accurate, the figure that I think you guys would want to see, not each individual separate on paper, here's what that one, okay, the Sinking Springs Cemetery, this is what we're spending. So you do have that information. It is provided to you on a detailed basis, but for the purpose of the presentation, I felt it was more prudent to summarize those. So the proposed, for these 4 functions, the proposed budget is $673,707. And last year, we appropriated almost about the same, so there's only a slight change. And so, as I said, we have a separate budget for the council, manager, and town attorney. Since we no longer employ a town attorney, we basically have one line item in that budget, so we just moved that to town administration, just created a legal services expense account for legal services under the town administration budget. Several of the expenses were moved from the town council budget to town administration, and we had a separate budget for human resources, which really is a function of town administration, so we consolidated that in the town administration budget. And we previously, one change I wanted to point out, we previously had 2 employees that were in other departments, HR and payroll, that we moved to town administration, but to the town administration budget. So if you're looking at the salaries line item specifically in the town administration budget, you're going to say, why on earth is that so much higher than it was last year? Well, it's because we put two individual employees we've moved from one from finance and one from HR. We've incorporated that in the town administration budget, and you'll see, for instance, in finance, there's a corresponding reduction on that expense account in finance. We did eliminate one thing I wanted to point out. We did eliminate a timekeeping software program that we felt wasn't necessary, and we were just going to use the accounting program that we have, Edmunds, to use that. It's just a cost savings, and primarily it was a decision by HR and payroll and myself and IT to just go back to what we were using with Edmunds. So open to any questions about this.
Yeah, how hard, Mr. Moretti, was it were you have difficulties changing from the OpenGov to back to our old Edmunds system? Was
Well,
that
this
hard to do?
Novatime is the timekeeping one. We'll get into Edmunds and when we get to finance. The main problem that we had with Novatime is the compatibility. One of the problems is the PTO time. Because we have a PTO system, it wasn't compatible with Edmunds. Another issue is with police. Since they had shift workers, it was creating issues. But the bottom line is, we had a practice of spending money on programs outside of the one that we were using, and we need to go back to using what we have, which is Edmunds. Edmunds can do all of the things that we were paying third parties to do, and that's what we're trying to get back into doing, is eliminating these third-party software programs, consolidating it all and using it in Edmunds. I've talked with department heads about that. I've talked to IT. It's just the most efficient way of doing it. It causes the least amount of errors. And this particular one, this is our second timekeeping software. This was actually new. We used it. We started it last year because the previous one was not entirely compatible with Edmunds. This one was a little bit better, but there were still some compatibility issues. So we decided just to eliminate it for those reasons, as I stated. So, okay, I'll go on to the finance, which I'll get into OpenGov there. Last year's, or the appropriation for this year is $451,107. The appropriation for last year was $548,023. You can see the large variance. One of that is the payroll impact, also some consulting, some contractual services, as I mentioned below, with the OpenGov. So once again, we had a separate budget for auditing expenses. So we had one separate budget, a separate code for audit, and there was only one in there. So that one we just moved into the finance department. It's now just an expense account within the finance department for auditing expenses. And as I said earlier, the payroll clerk moved from the finance to town administration. And the OpenGov, the main reason why, there's a couple reasons why we wanted to go back to just using Edmunds and not using OpenGov. I understand the need or the desire to be transparent. The issue is, for the amount of money that we were paying, we didn't feel like that the half dozen people that were going online to view it every month, in addition to everything else I'm going to tell you, was worth it. It is very, I will say this, OpenGov, the budget process, it was somewhat user-friendly only if you're using it for the budget process internally. But the minute you get to presenting it to like you guys, like I remember the meetings that you guys had last year, those 9 to 10 hour budget meetings, it's not easy to print because it was just shown on the screen, and so you'd have to export all that information and print it out on spreadsheets, which can be done, but it wasn't done. The main issue with the budget process as far as internally is concerned is that once all that information is put into OpenGov, it then has to be imported into Edmunds. That can lead to errors. It also creates more time. Last year, it had to be manually done. My understanding was they were going to try to get that adjusted or corrected so it could automatically be imported into Edmunds. But the main issue is department heads aren't using it during the regular course of the year. And it's not that, I understand why, because the information, we have two different systems. The information has to go from Edmunds during the year. It has to be then imported into OpenGov, or exported out of Edmunds, imported into OpenGov, and that was only done once a month. It wasn't done continuously. Well, when department heads wanted to know what was in their budget before they made an expense, they were going right to Edmunds because it was real time, as opposed to waiting towards the end of the month, and they were used to Edmunds. So I'm not saying OpenGov is a bad program. I think when, for some organizations, it might be good, but for the amount of money that we were spending, it just didn't make sense, and you know, it's not something that we need, and it's something we can just go back to using it at Edmonds. I had support from the department heads. I asked them, you know, there was one or two comments. They did like OpenGov, but for the most part, overwhelmingly, most of the departments prefer just to go back to using Edmonds, so it saves us, you know, $22,000+ a year. We will try to get some information up on the website throughout the year that might have replaced what was on there for OpenGov in a different format, but there'll be things that we develop, or we can produce internally, not have to have a third party to do it.
So a lot of this can be put like on the website. You can share things.
Yeah, we
from
can-
Edmonds. I think
yeah.
Mr. Bailey and I had a discussion about
Yeah,
this.
we can export any report from Edmonds, and we can put any information that for expenses. I mean, you know, the pie charts and stuff, that's all looks good. I mean, it looks nice and stuff, but, you know, I don't think it's worth the $22,000. I think people are looking for numbers, and we can easily produce numbers to post up on the website, and that can be done very inexpensively. So, okay, so I'll move on to the next. Public Works. In late 2009, we restructured several departments to enhance efficiencies. The Public Works Department now consists of the following divisions. We've got streets, solid waste collection, recycling, and the town shop. We've got Parks and Grounds, that's Kevin's department. Jamie's department is the first one. Facilities Maintenance, which is the new division that we created. Matt Henderson is our director in that department. And then wastewater, you've got Sarita, and then underneath that, you've got a division of collections, Mike Rourke. And so the purpose was to get one Department of Public Works working more collaboratively, coordinating on projects, and me not having, you know, 14 or 15 different department heads to to supervise. It just made it really efficient. And in fact, you know, we talked about that before John was hired, about, you know, his feelings on that, and we felt I felt that was an area that I wanted to go. So what that means from the budget is not a lot, because we still have those separate budgets. It doesn't mean we're consolidating a lot of the budgets like we did with the previous town administration and town council, because each one of those division heads, they kind of manage their own budget. But, you know, we look at it operationally. You know, I look at it as Public Works. You know, obviously, things can get specific, but one person, one man answers. He's responsible. He's accountable. Right there. You're looking at him. If anything goes wrong, I'm going to him. So, the Facilities Maintenance Division was created to coordinate maintenance to public facilities through a single department. And I want to stress how confusing it was. This is actually an idea that Stephanie had. We went through a capital improvement plan meeting. She looked over at me and says, "You need to have a facility maintenance department." We were having the planning department, tourism, all these separate departments coming to us about just regular maintenance items and things that they really shouldn't be concerned about. They're really not integral to their operations. And it really has helped take the load off Jason and Rick, particularly with the historic properties. Now we have a trained professional who actually is staying on top of all the facilities. He's been very proactive. So I think this has been a good addition to the town. There really hasn't been a huge increase other than the staff person itself, because all the other expenses were just kind of rolled into this budget. So as far as the repairs and whatnot. So the next slide is going to focus on the three divisions and the Public Works Administration that operate out of the general fund. So we'll cover the general fund budgets on the next slide. I'm not going to go through each one of these individually because they're pretty much the same. So if anybody has any questions after seeing this, there really wasn't a whole lot of changes in the Public Works Department as it pertained to the general fund departments. The one thing I will point out, we do have, which didn't really have a net impact, a great net impact in the street and solid waste collection, recycling, and shop budget, is we do have an increase. I think it was like $20,000 or $30,000, John, on the solid waste that would otherwise have been being recycled. But with other cuts that we made in there, was kind of offset with some other cuts. Although we did move the debt service, I think, for one of the vehicles over to the debt service department, but or the debt service budget. So for the most part, it was pretty much same level of spending across the board. So, and remember, this is not specific to capital stuff. We'll get into that. This is just basically operations, because we have that separate capital fund that we've established. we're talking, this is day-to-day operations, regular repairs, day-to-day maintenance, salaries, fringe benefits, and those things. So, any questions? Okay. Public safety, not a huge change there. We did not purchase any patrol vehicles this year. We did have some budgeted, but we did not. So we are, we'll get to that when we get to the capital projects fund. But we removed those out of the department budget and put them in a capital fund, capital projects fund. The fire department, you'll see a significant decrease in what we budgeted last year, and this is primarily the result of, maybe it's Mayor, primarily the result of combination of removing the debt service for the department to the separate, we have a separate debt service budget for accounting purposes. And then also, we did have, as you may recall, there was a decision was made before I got here last year to establish 2 new positions for fire officials where they could do inspections and potentially also assist the fire department or the fire chief on fire calls. And that it was made, the decision was made to not fill those positions because of the town's budget situation. So we had started to advertise the position before the pandemic hit, and we just kind of put the brakes on that. So that's why you see that significant reduction, because those planned expenses are not being made. Any questions on the public safety side?
Yeah, so the police department, I just wanted to go over that real quick about
Sure.
the leases. We had leases at one point for the police department, I believe. Enterprise,
No, we did not do any leases for the police department. It was talked about. We do have leases for all the other departments, but we had not transitioned the police department into the leases yet. I did have some concerns doing it for the police department. The numbers weren't convincing to me that it was going to be cost effective. We have equipment that has to be mounted on each one, so every time you get a new vehicle, the equipment has to be replaced if it's not the same. So I think for the amount of money that we might have potentially saved, it just wasn't worth it. I had these conversations with the chief and John Holbrook about it, and the overwhelming consensus of the 3 of us was just to not lease police vehicles. I think it's in our best interest to just continue to purchase them. I don't think the benefit is that great. I do think for some of the other departments, it does make sense. So I'm happy with, and I know John, I think you guys are happy with so far with the lease situation, and I think Jamie is. I mean, I've got some feedback from Jamie because he kind of manages the fleet. So yeah, we are not leasing through Enterprise for the police department.
Chief Sullivan expressed that, and I
Yeah.
didn't know where we were with that. So
No, we had kind of punted
purchasing
that.
their vehicles, and
Right.
we're happy with that program.
Yep, and we're purchasing those off state contracts. Yeah.
That's good.
Okay. Does that answer your questions on that
It
one?
did, and
Okay.
maintenance on the other departments, we do a lot of the maintenance, don't we?
Correct.
And that's handled in our shop, so it really is very cost effective to do that, and it
Yeah.
saves us money.
Yeah, and even for the leases, for the stuff that's not warranty related, we'll do the oil changes, we'll do everything, we'll do the regular maintenance on even the leased vehicles, and it keeps the shop busy doing that. And so they work on both the leased vehicles and the squad cars.
I believe you removed 4.
Yeah, we originally did have 4 in there, but we cut that back to 3, and I just want to
Okay.
point out, we'll get to it on the capital projects fund page about
Okay.
the allocation of the funds and how that's being paid for, so.
So you had 4 vehicles.
Well, originally the request was made for 4 by the department, but we reduced that to 3. So we, as I mean me, I probably made that decision. I don't know if we ever discussed it in detail at the finance committee, but I just told the chief we can't afford 4, so we just got to do 3. And he says, well, I got some asset forfeiture money that we can use. Because I was even debating whether or not we could do 3, but when he told me he had the asset forfeiture money, it made it a little bit easier to swallow. So we'll cover that in a second when I get to the capital projects one. I can explain that. Okay, this one is the one that Derek referred to earlier, the Coombs Center. You could see that there's a drastic reduction, and I just want to remind everybody, when we put this budget together, it was a worst-case scenario. When we started this budget, we didn't know how long COVID was going to last. We didn't know if there was going to be a second wave. And we also got to realize that whatever we the situation with the Coombs Center is because it is substantially subsidized by the general fund, I mean, if it was a business, we would lose money. I'm not saying that we do everything to make money, because there's things that we do that provide quality of life that the residents expect, but this is one where we're talking about delivering essential services and trying to balance the budget, was one of the areas that we were forced to make reductions in because of the severe situation with the economy and the town's revenue situation.
And I believe the number is like $900,000
Yeah.
that we subsidize it.
From the general fund, yeah.
Almost not.
Yeah.
So, so as you know, the facility's been closed since March 14th, and as I stated earlier, we've laid off part-time and 10 of the 13 full-time employees. One of the employees was reassigned temporarily to another department. So we have 2 full-times, the co-directors, that are currently employed by the town that are at the Coombs Center. And they actually have been helping on a few other projects that we've needed them to, since they've had some downtime. So because of the anticipated decline in the general fund revenue for the upcoming fiscal year, we're unable to operate the facility at previous service levels until the budget is amended. If future revenues provide for the reopening of the facility, it'll be a phased-in approach, obviously trying to be done in a safe manner for the guests, and also in an effort to, and the employees, and also in an effort to control the costs. Since the closure of the facility on March 14th, charges for memberships have been placed on hold. Those with prepaid memberships will be extended for the amount of time the facility is closed up to the expiration date. What I mean here is somebody prepaid and they were 6 months in, and then March 14th hit, well, we've just paused them, and they get, when the facility reopens, they'll get an additional 6 months. Does that make sense? So we've just kind of suspended their membership for the prepaid memberships. For the annual memberships, say one were to expire on June 14th, which would have been 3 months away from when we closed the facility on March the 14th. Whenever the facility reopens, their termination of their membership will just be pushed ahead by 3 months. So we're in essence just moving it forward 3 months. What that does for our revenue situation is it severely impacts our revenue for the upcoming fiscal year, because depending on how long the facility remains closed, it's kind of a double-edged sword. We open the facility too soon, yeah, we speed up the amount of memberships that we might get, but the services are going to be limited, and the expenses are going to go up in the general fund. So we're kind of like between a rock and a hard place. I think the time is to find that happy medium when it's safe to open up the facility to provide them as much level of service that we can, that the public expects, that the paid members expect, and then continue on from that point. So that is the revenue impact, and that is why. My audio okay?
Yeah, just take your mask off.
I don't want to take my mask off.
There's nobody within 6 feet of you.
Are you lecturing me?
No.
Okay, all right.
I don't want to see you pass out.
I'm not going to pass out.
I can hear you gasping for air.
Okay, I'll take it out for a while. Thanks. I could use the oxygen. Thanks for thinking about me. Because of the membership revenue, that's definitely a concern. So that's why in one of the previous slides, I had a $435,000 reduction in revenue. That is just worst case scenario. I mean, it's possible we could be punting some of these revenues for the memberships until the following fiscal year, depending on when we open. So just want to point that out, that even if we do get back to within this upcoming fiscal year to collecting revenue from memberships, remember that cost is going to exceed that membership revenue coming in. So we're hopeful if we are able to do that, our meals and lodging taxes and our other revenue streams are much more healthier. Did you have something you wanted to say,
I was
Donna?
just going to say, people need to realize that as everything starts coming back, we will adjust the budget accordingly, It'll,
Jimmy, I have a question about the Coombs Center.
Yeah.
That seems to me that's going to be a very difficult situation, because we have a membership fee, and the membership fee is for all the services, and
Right.
it's, in my view, it's probably going to be a long time before we're going to be in phase 3 of the governor's order.
Yeah, I can tell you that
Is there any
some of the
thought-
discussions I've had with the staff is we want to make sure that when we open the facility, we can do it where people who are paying members are getting their money's worth. It's not fair to open the facility and say, well, you can't do this and you can't do that. Wait a second, I'm paying a membership fee for this. And as much as we want them to be able to utilize any of the, some of the facility, it's not fair to them for us to charge them for a full membership when they can't utilize all the amenities there. So that is, Jennifer and Militia have been planning some potentially phased-in openings that still might allow the use of some of the amenities, but maybe at a certain level. Like if the pool opens up, only allowing a certain amount of people in there at one time. But they're getting a lot of information from the Parks and Recs Association on best practices on what to do. So, but yeah, it's gonna be tough until we get to phase 3, probably, to really feel comfortable opening up the facility because of the social distancing guidelines. So, okay. I'm gonna move on to the next one. Tourism. As you can see, another department that we had to initiate reductions in because of the potential loss in revenues in the general fund. And just so everybody understands what those numbers represent at the top, because on paper we have the tourism department, which is like the visitor center, and we've got the Abingdon Muster Grounds, which is underneath the tourism umbrella. Those numbers are combined, reflective of those departments combined, as well as we have a separate budget for the special events that the town runs. So that number at the top is reflective of all 3 of those budgets combined, since those fall under the tourism umbrella. As I stated earlier, we have the workforce reductions that were made. The visitor center and the muster grounds have been closed since late March, and the reopening of these facilities will be dependent on the town's financial status. Staffing these at the previous levels will require an amendment to the 2021 budget. One concern is because these locations they're frequented by out-of-town visitors, we want to be really careful when we open up the facility and make sure that we have necessary precautions and protections for the employees, as far as whether it being enclosures, plexiglass. We've come up with all kinds of different ideas. We're going to try to provide some before we open, maybe provide some information outside of the visitor center, like brochures, which we still have actually there right now, but try to direct people there. We're in conversation with the parent organization that the Friends of Southwest Virginia that operate the Cultural Center and Marketplace, formerly known as Heartwood, and communicate with them to see what their timeline is for opening. So we kind of want to see what their schedule is. So we realize that the visitor center particularly is a source of information for people who just want to come in and shop downtown. So we've got to try to weigh that and debate how soon it is we can open. But the staffing situation is something that we're going to have to get creative with until we amend the budget. So I've got some ideas, plan on talking with staff over the next couple weeks, come up with some suggestions on how we can maybe look at doing that before we have to bring some of the other employees back potentially. The July 4th celebration and some other events have been canceled. So that is in the special event budget, or the community programs is what it's listed in the detailed budget that you have. But that is all of the events that the town runs or the town organizes. So you've got the Thursday jams, the January jams, but the July 4th celebration, not the fireworks portion, but the event that we had at the farmers market, that was actually eliminated before we decided to cut the fireworks. And the street party and the Creeper Trail Fest, those events have all been canceled this year. So there are corresponding reductions made in that special event budget. So, any questions on the tourism or
I
comments?
just have one question. It's not necessarily tourism, but I just want to know if we opened the Creeper Trail, has there been any problems with social distancing or anything that it,
I've heard occasional reports. I don't think it's been too out of hand. I haven't gotten any feedback that says it's you know, I haven't, the chief will tell me if we've gotten a lot of complaints, or we'll hear from the Conservancy. We've got a few correspondence that came through the Conservancy about some feedback, but it was nothing that we thought was, it's just tough to enforce. I'll be honest with you. I mean, we can put all the kinds of rules out there we want to, but people need to kind of self-police things. I mean, unless we're having large congregations of, you know, dozens of people, you know, it's just going to be tough for us to enforce that. We do have signs posted, and the Conservancy is actually going to be putting up signs every 20 or 30 yards. I can't remember what the distance is going to be, just to encourage people to social distance and stuff. But I haven't heard any major issues along the trail, other than a little baby raccoon that was looking for a trash can that we removed, I think, so that's probably why. Had to go find some.
I don't think raccoons have COVID-19.
No, you can get rabies, though. That's the only thing we got to be worried about, right? Any other questions about the tourism? No.
January jams, Thursday night jams at Busker Fest, that's about $160,000, is that what you?
Well, that's kind of it. Thursday jams, we've canceled just for this year. It goes into next year. The events would typically run from spring, you know, late spring to summer. So the portion that we removed from this budget was just the portion that was the 2020 portion. So we do have it in there for next year in this particular budget. We did not do anything with January jams. We were hopeful that maybe we can do that in January. All these events are 2020 calendar year events. One thing I want to note is if we were to remove some of those events, like say the January Jams event, what we have budgeted on the revenue side pretty much becomes a wash on the expense side. So if we decided to say, just if say for some reason the event wasn't able to take place, we have a second, you know, wave of COVID, it doesn't really have a huge impact if we eliminate the event, because we've got the revenue there to offset it. Because I think it's all about $10,000 is sponsorships and ticket sales. So eliminating it or keeping it in there right now is not really having a huge impact. Does that make sense? Does everybody understand that? Okay. So it's really kind of budget neutral. Whereas, like say the Busker Fest, that was one that we did eliminate because it's not on here. Actually, I'll get to it in the next slide.
Excuse me.
Because half of that event, a 20,000 event, half of that was sponsorship. The other 10,000 was covered by the town, and it is happening this year. So we do know that we're gonna.
So in our line item, do you have where this is that you take?
Yeah, it's under community programs is the name of the special event budget. It's called community programs. We're probably gonna rename some of these as well because it doesn't correspond to what we call them. So it makes it a little bit easier to follow, but that's just the verbiage that's been in there from probably 3 previous town managers, or whenever the software program was entered into the software program originally, and because mostly it's just accounting that deals, you know, with this, you know, when I present it, I pretty much can call it anything I want to as long as the accounting knows what it is.
So,
It should be towards, let me see if I can find it on the budget. The original budget document. Obviously, it's in the general fund. It is.
there it is. It's on page 24.
Okay. What is it after?
No, that's community development.
Okay.
Community programs is on page 25.
Okay. I'm looking at the one that I posted online. Let me see. What's it after, Cindy?
It's after,
Or before?
community development. It's
Okay.
after that.
After community development.
So community.
Oh, there it is, yeah. Okay, so it's, yeah, and then before economic development. Yeah, so what we had budgeted, this was the version that we presented on the 20th. We had, the only 3 events we have scheduled
160.
is January Jams, Thursday Jams, and and Busker Fest, but we've since made the decision, since the last meeting, to cancel the Busker Fest. So that's what I'm going to get to at the very end of the presentation.
All right, thank you.
And so when you look at those 100 and, well, say you look at January jams at 80,000, we've pretty much gotten most of that budgeted in revenue for sponsorships and ticket sales. So if we were to just eliminate it now, it really doesn't make a difference because it doesn't have an impact to the budget since we've got the revenue projected.
If we eliminated it, could we not use it for something else?
Well, but it's not money that we would necessarily, if we eliminated the January Jams event, like if it comes to the point where if we can't do it because of health reasons or whatever, or we can't get bands, it doesn't really have a budget impact because we've got the revenue budgeted at close to $80,000. So, I mean, it's offsetting. We have offsetting revenue for the expense. So it's not like we save $80,000 if we eliminate that event. We go in there and we eliminate the revenue that was almost $80,000 as well. Does that make sense?
It's offset.
Yeah, it's just, it's a
Well,
wash.
I don't mean to
Yeah.
permanently, do away with it, but.
Yeah.
I was just saying, like, maybe temporary, because we're not, like you said, the Busker Fest,
It,
we're not
it,
gonna.
well, the Busker Fest was one we were trying to hold on to as long as we could. It's an outdoor event and it's spaced out, but it's really approaching very rapidly and I don't think we
not
have,
enough time, probably.
yeah, there's a lot of events that are being canceled, so it wasn't anything out of the norm to cancel that. So I'm gonna go ahead and move on to the next slide. I didn't really get too much into detail for these departments because there's really not a lot of changes to them. I tried to focus on the departments that had the most changes in the previous slides. So you'll notice the building department, it looks like we've laid off half the department, but it's actually a combination of not filling a position that we had planned, an inspector position, and the elimination of some soft costs. But we did actually have, I'm sorry, the other reason why we have a huge change there is, in addition to not filling a position, we had moved the employee that was under the building department who was dealing with facility maintenance to the facility maintenance department. So that's another reason why for the change. So it's not a huge savings to the department because we're just shifting that position to another budget, but we did not budget a position that we intended to fill. We're going to hold off on that for this upcoming fiscal year, an inspector
How many
position.
employees you have under facilities maintenance?
Right now, just two. We've got the
Okay.
director and then the person who does the, what's the title of that position? I found like 3 different titles. Technician, person that goes around and does a lot of the regular maintenance and does the HVAC. And we moved that person to the facilities maintenance department, so. And even if for instance, if we didn't have that employee in-house and we just had the facility maintenance manager, that person would just be involved with contracting things out. We still need a facility maintenance manager, whether or not we have, any employees underneath that particular manager. That person would just manage and already does manage a lot of the contractors that come in and do work for the town, manage the maintenance schedule. So, okay, I'll move on to the next slide. The Capital Projects Fund. This is the new fund that we created. This was one of the only items that we salvaged from our capital improvement plan that we basically just had to gut, which we were prepared to present a couple months ago before the coronavirus hit us. These public safety radios are predominantly what's in the IT department's portion of the Capital Projects Fund. Those were items that were discussed last year. I think you might have discussed it at a budget work session, and we punted those for this year, and that's an essential purchase. So we are budgeting that. The police department, that's where you see those patrol vehicles, and of the 3 vehicles that we're purchasing, which total $180,000, $100,000 of that is coming from the asset forfeiture fund. That is a restricted fund. It can't be used for other general purposes, like for public works or even for police expenses that are not allowed, as we're permitted by law. Thanks. This is such a tough word I had to come up with. Not allowed, permitted by law. But one thing that I had a council member ask me about was the revenue. They noticed that there was only $20,000 or some odd $1,000 in revenue showing for the asset forfeitures, but this is an accumulated surplus of funds that we've had, so we have a balance this fiscal year, we'll have a balance that'll exceed $100,000. So that will be the funds that are applied towards these purchases. So, and that really just depends on, that can fluctuate depending on how many seizures are made during the year. So I think you understand, where that money comes from. So the facilities maintenance, the main line item in that department is the Fields Pen renovations. Currently, the exterior renovations have been completed mostly, right? The foundation work, yeah, and that's you're talking about the cosmetic stuff, but the foundation, the structure, the really complicated work that we had to get two different contractors for, the micro piles and the bolting, yeah, but there's another word, micro piles.
The micropiles.
No, what's the other?
The micropiles
The
and the
washer.
Washers,
Yes.
tie washer system.
The-
Thanks,
the
Cindy.
washer system.
Do we have a goal set when we might be finished with this, or is it just weather permitting?
Well,
Well,
For the
outside.
exterior work?
Yeah.
We do have some additional drainage work that needs to be done in the field, to take care of the downspouts and the yard inlets and that sort of thing. That's some pipe installation. It's really been too wet to
Oh,
get
I
in
know.
there and without making more of a mess.
Yeah, I know,
So we're hoping to complete that within probably next month and
weather
a half.
permitting.
Right.
yeah, the next phase is the interior, what that is the interior renovations to prepare it for use for the tourism department. We do have an architect that's working on developing some plans, and, that will be budget depending on, how far we want to go with it. But with the tight budget year that it is, we're just going to try to stick to the essentials as best that we can, get it to the point where, we can always make it enhancements later, in subsequent fiscal years. But we do want to make it a inviting environment and make sure that, all the basics are covered. But it is, much like the Hassinger House was converted into, office space, public areas, we're doing the same thing here. So I don't know what the schedule will be on that, because it won't be weather dependent, it'll be indoor. Most of those renovations will be indoors. We talked about doing a few outdoor components of that project, but that's the majority of what that department's capital fund portion is.
And for the public's benefit to know this, that's redoing the interior if we move the tourism department over there. And,
Right.
there's a lot of things that's gonna be done, and I was thinking about that budget. When we move that, how much is that gonna cost overall when if they move over there? As far as
You mean like the actual moving of it?
Renovations, because there was a
Yeah,
lot of renovations.
well, right now, we budgeted for the actual renovations, that's what we budgeted right now, is this $125,000. That's what we have in the current budget, and we're hopeful we can do what we need to do with that amount of money.
Is the building?
Is the building-
You cut in and out, Al.
I'm sorry, is the Fields Pen built?
We can't hear you.
Well, we can't hear.
We got the first part, but not the second.
Is the building stabilized?
Oh, yes.
Foundation.
Yes, the foundation yes, it is stabilized. That is the work that was done previously, yes. And and some of the interior work that's involved is because of doing the tie rod and washer system, they had to remove some of the floorboard planks, and those have to be reinstalled, and that has to be all cleaned up. That's going to be part of the renovation process. So some of the floorboards have been removed and exposed because of the work associated with that.
Going back to the radios, if I may, if you're finished with that. So they're in the capital project fund here, and $530,680, which is a real need, according to Chief Sullivan. This is for the police department and the fire department together?
Correct. And those are going to be financed.
I'm sorry, please.
Yes, correct. Those are for it's for the police and the fire department, and those will be financed over 5 years. So it won't be an outlay, it won't be from a cash flow perspective, it won't be like we're expending $530,000 and that's the entire expense. It is going to be financed, so it'll be, divide that approximately by 5 and add some interest in there. I think we show it on, we also show it as an expense in that particular department. We show the expense, the whole expense, and then we show the debt service. So that is not going to be 1 year's expense. It's too great of a number for that to be absorbed in one fiscal year.
We wouldn't have
determined.
been able to do it.
Yeah, we wouldn't, otherwise we wouldn't have been able to do it. Let me see if I can find what we budgeted for the annual payment.
Do they have an estimated time they're gonna be able to get these? I know after July 1, of course, but.
Yeah, I don't know, I know they want to get it soon because the radios that they're using right now, they're obsolete and they're not able to get parts for, or it's very costly to get those repaired. So I assume it'll probably happen relatively soon after the first part of the fiscal year. Yeah. We'll have to secure financing. We'll get quotes from the various banks on interest rates. So.
Should be a good interest rate right now.
Yes.
Since you asked,
Yeah, you remember what the amount was to finance that? Was it 60?
the first 5 years?
Yeah. What was the annual? I just gotta do the
I
math.
don't remember what the annual was, but I can tell you this, we've been talking to several of the vendors, and right now, I'm expecting our costs to actually go down to what we
Good.
projected.
For the purchase of the actual, okay.
Yes, and also, there. and
I'm sorry,
also
100,000.
there are some really, well, zero interest rates
That's right.
right now. So what we're doing is trying to just gather the preliminary information. So July 1, we hit the ground running and hopefully pull it all together.
We want to kind of strike while the iron's hot too with the interest rates.
Yeah, absolutely. And the vendors right now are just dropping prices like we've never seen before. So we don't know how much it's going to be, but I can tell you it's going to save us money. And that's a good thing.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
So we'll probably be less than what we've budgeted for. I did the math wrong. I said, say it's over 100,000 if you divide that by 5. It's 106, but then you don't add the interest, and I do have a number, and I want to say it's like 111,000 that we budgeted for.
I'm just glad we're getting them, that's great.
Yeah, I
The
believe.
beneficial savings.
Let's see. Yeah, I don't have it in front of me, but anyhow. Is there any more questions on the capital projects fund? And anything that is going to be expended from the capital projects fund that would normally come from the general fund, we're just doing a fund transfer. It's just, we want to keep these segregated for various reasons, but also for auditing purposes. It's better for the auditors to see what was spent on capital projects, but it also helps us visually to see what the projects are. We can kind of separate the operating expenditures from the capital projects, and we can kind of see, okay, here's what operations is, and here are the larger capital expenditures. And they're fairly common. I was actually surprised that we didn't have one when I got here, but
Yeah, I like it better this way.
yeah, I think it's easier to manage. It's more transparent, so. All right, I'll go ahead and move to the next slide. Here are some of the departments, more departments in the capital projects fund. Fairly minor. Now, we do have the Meadows Sports Complex in there. The proposed approximately $7.5 million. If we were closing the Coombs Center, we wouldn't be upgrading the HVAC system. That is something that does have to happen. It will actually help control costs as well. We have a maintenance contract that's expiring at the end of the fiscal year, so we need to make that upgrade in consultation with our facilities maintenance department. They recommended that we continue to make that improvement. There is a reduction in one of the following slides I'll recommend for the rec center that we can take out. But anybody have any questions on this?
So the Coombs Center for the 2021 proposed, what's the 55,500?
One of them is going to be, one of them was for a curtain. I'm going to recommend that we eliminate that. These were some additional cuts that we made after we finalized the budget. just looking at the revenue situation.
So we're gonna cut about 55,000.
No, we're gonna cut like 11,000 from that 55. Yeah, it's for an accordion door for one of the meeting rooms that, I asked Jennifer and Alicia if it was an essential, and they said they could wait another year, so.
And you know, like you said, when everything opens up and we get more tax revenue coming in.
Right.
We
Yeah.
can add
mean,
that back in.
Some of these things we've lived out for a while, we can just push it off another year, so. All right, I'll go ahead and go to the street maintenance fund. This was a new fund that we created. This will really help John better track his VDOT expenditures. So some of these will be coming in the form of transfers from the general fund into the street maintenance fund. Some of them will be VDOT funds that will probably just deposit directly or apply directly to this fund when they come in. As you can see, the various projects that we have in here, transportation and curb, gutter, sidewalk, some of those are line items that are budgeted every year. The street paving, it's critical that we continue the street paving because we do have to keep up with the funds that we receive from VDOT. We don't want to be in a situation where we have a surplus of VDOT funds, so we want to continue to allocate a healthy amount. So we're spending at least what we have every year coming in on those VDOT funds because we can't use them for anything else either. I did want to note that the Russell Road Pedestrian Enhancement Project, which is what we're going to talk about shortly, it's not going to be completed in the current fiscal year, so we are going to have to incorporate that project into an amended budget. We've already spent some money on engineering, so there has been some costs applied to that project. So it is 100% a VDOT funded project, so it's really budget neutral. So when we eventually complete that project, when we make a budget amendment, we'll just wrap that into that process, but it won't be any new spending because it's just a pass-through. We're getting 100% reimbursed from VDOT for that project. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It does.
Yeah,
Okay.
I just got another question.
Okay.
Continue.
No, that's it. That's all I had on that one, so.
In some of my paperwork here, I found the $100,000 engineering for Green Spring Road. Do you know?
Yeah, that's gonna come, we'll get to that, that'll be on the last slide. So I will we'll go ahead and cover that, and then I'll probably ask John to make a statement, because he's a little bit more knowledgeable about what we're doing there. Okay, so we'll go to the next slide, which we're close to wrapping up here. Not a ton of changes in the operations of the sewer department. As you can see, we did not, for reasons, since the sewer fund is an enterprise fund, we don't want to mingle sewer funds with capital project funds or general funds. So all of the capital projects that would be sewer related for either the treatment plant or for collection system, we are keeping in the sewer fund. And as you see on the bottom, those are the capital projects that we've budgeted. The I&I system upgrades, the force main upgrades, and we have 100,000. This is just the majority of that 1.47 million are those. Correct me if I'm wrong, John. The project that we're doing at Exit 19.
Force main.
Yeah, the force main.
For Southview, yes.
So but we're not going to probably expend that. We're not expending that until next fiscal year, probably, right? That's why we have it. Yeah. Okay. I know. We've started the agreements, but we weren't. There's going to be no expenses this fiscal year on that project lately.
The only potential one would be if we enter into that agreement with VDOT about the portions going to take place in the Exit 19 project.
Okay.
That, given where we are now, late
Okay.
or mid-May.
Probably not likely. Okay. So we budgeted the entire amount in the next fiscal year. So, but we have initiated that project already, and VDOT is going to assist. I mean, really, they're assisting us because they didn't have to do it.
They allowed us to include the
Yeah.
portion of the force main relocation within the Exit 19 project area into their project. So
Yeah.
it will be part of that project as bid. Their contractor will do the force main relocation.
And we'll pay the
That
difference
project limit.
if it's considered a betterment, whatever.
Yes.
You know, so that those will be used with sewer funds. But since we already got the mobilization of the contractor, the ground's already open, it just makes complete sense to have that project done in conjunction with the transportation component of it, so. All right. Any specific questions about the sewer fund? Okay. Okay, now we're getting into the revisions. So after the presentation on April 20th, for several reasons, one out of just the need to further reduce expenditures as a result of COVID, but also some additional operational needs that came up or capital need that came up. We are recommending that based on any feedback we get from council, any public comments that we get, that we take these proposed revisions into consideration and potentially incorporate those into a future revised budget to be considered as early as the 15th. But because of the fluid situation with COVID, we had to use April 20th as the base budget that we presented as the budget that we advertised. Once we've gotten to the point where we have the public hearing, we will then proceed to incorporate some of these changes into a final draft of a budget. And what we have on the next two slides are additions and reductions based on items the staff has identified as things that we need to do. The first slide, was that Al jumping in or somebody?
Oh, so,
Oh, okay. The first slide is the proposed new expenditure. So what this represents is the line item budget that you have. These are changes to those line items on the version that you have dated April 20th, and it's both, these numbers are both the line items, the April 20th budget that we put out, the version that you got, which was presented to you and distributed to you, was a lot more detailed. The version on the website has the same information. It's a little bit more streamlined. If you want to look at these particular expense accounts, we're recommending that they change and increase by this amount, and the new total represents what the new total will be on that particular line item. The two that were probably of interest, that I guess I do want to identify. Well, one was Sustain Abingdon. We actually determined that in order to do those recycling events with the electronic waste, the e-waste, we were going to have to restore an additional $5,000 to that. I think that's a good event. It helps keep that stuff out of the solid waste containers, and environmentally, it's recommended. The IT department, there was a that's actually not a new expense, but it was just a debt service item that was overlooked because it was a purchase that was made recently, and we just didn't include it in the first draft of the budget, so that's why we do this. So it's not a new expense, it's one that we're going to have to pay, but we didn't include it in the April 20th draft. These last two items, the stormwater engineering, we did have $25,000 budgeted this year for that stormwater engineering on Main. We do not think we're going to be able to accomplish that before the end of the fiscal year. So that is why we've moved that to the subsequent fiscal year. So we're recommending that we include that $25,000 in the next fiscal year budget. We have had made some progress on that, but we don't think by the time we have an engineer looking at the plans for the previous project that we did, and they're starting to bill us, it won't probably be until after July 1st. So. The last item, which is what Cindy had mentioned, it involves primarily involves a culvert on Green Spring Road. We don't know. I'll turn that over to you, John. Here, you could probably explain the situation there better than me. Yeah, go.
We have large diameter.
Here, let me give you the microphone. So.
Yeah, did you sanitize?
No, I'll put my mask on.
All right. There on Green Spring Road where Town Creek crosses under, we have large diameter pipes there that are quite old and their condition is pretty poor. We've had our staff go in there before during low water conditions and have noted a lot of, it's metal pipe, and a lot of the metal on the bottom of the pipe or the flow line area has rusted out and in poor condition. During the April 12th, 13th storm event where we had such high water,
we had an area adjacent to the pipe wash out and ended up causing the edge of Green Spring Road there to buckle under or collapse. We did close traffic in time before anything happened, or we were able to notice it and close traffic and do a quick repair there. But the initiative there is to start engineering on putting together a replacement for those culverts that carry Town Creek. We just think it's the pipe will inevitably, if just left in place, will fail at some point. So we'd like to get ahead of that game and have a plan in place and replacement before we have any larger issues. If there's any questions.
Nope, needs to be done.
That was one that we were not sure if it could wait a year. So when that storm event happened, John came to me and says, we got to do this now. So decision was sort of made after our April 20th meeting. So that's why we had this in here now. So the next slide, it deals with reductions. Some of them were previously discussed. I'm not going to get into each one, but there you see a couple of the special events that were impacted by 2020 cancellations. We did remove some leases from Enterprise that I reviewed the fleet and saw since we're not going to do a lot of traveling anytime soon, and based on the operational needs, we did eliminate a few leases, I think 3 leases, and then actually didn't plan to purchase a few new ones. So the total amount that we've reduced from that is $78,000. So what that leaves is a net, and I'll get to that in the next slide. If these revisions are incorporated into the proposed budget, the result will be a contingency reserve balance of $100,945. If you remember correctly, at the April 20th meeting, we presented a number, and it was approximately $194,000 as a contingency reserve. That was really the amount that would be a surplus, but we called it a contingency because we are fairly confident we might have to dip into that as the fiscal year progresses. Incorporating these changes does reduce that contingency reserve balance to $100,000 approximately. Now, we talked about non-departmentals at the last meeting. We've heard from one this evening. Obviously, we've got a limited amount of funds available to budget at this point. Doesn't mean it would not be incorporated into an amended budget as the town's revenue situation improves. But if we do allocate funds to non-departmentals specifically, we need to make sure that we at least, I think, keep something in the contingency. The 2 that stood out, I know that were talked about at the last council meeting, the Housing Authority and the Meals on Wheels. Based on my discussions with the executive director of the Housing Authority and weighing their requests versus the available funds the town has, I would recommend allocating $25,000 to the Housing Authority. They did request 50. I think it was 20,000 in operations, 30,000 in capital. I felt like $25,000 was a reasonable amount, considering it's a fourth of the contingency reserve balance that we would be facing. As far as the Meals on Wheels, I mean, we do have. I think the overall theme I gathered was making sure people in the community are being fed. We do have, we've got the community center, we've got the Faith in Action, we've got the Meals on Wheels program at District 3, which is the USDA funded program, and then we've got Southwest Feeding America Southwest Virginia, or Feeding Southwest Virginia. We've got them. So if you wanted to say, let's just go ahead and blanket support, you could just say, let's just donate to Feeding Southwest Virginia. But I just don't know if there's a need to, or if there, no, sorry, I just don't know if there's the ability to fund all of those organizations with what we have. I believe $5,000 is about, at this point,
Feeding
all we can.
America, don't they distribute food to these other?
Yeah, Feeding America does sell product at a reduced rate
Okay.
to the various, like I know the community center buys from them. They do have partners with the pantries.
They also have a kitchen, don't
And,
they?
and they do have a kitchen, yeah, which I think it was just doing drive-up while they were closed.
Yeah.
But the town does have a contingency fund that they have for this current fiscal year, and in the event that you feel that there's a need that needs to be met, now it could decide to look at that contingency fund that is remaining and, potentially allocate those funds. But we do also have fourth quarter allocations that are looming as well. So just because we don't budget those expenditures for these nonprofits as of July 1st doesn't mean you can't help them between now and then, and it doesn't mean they won't be helped if we amend the budget. It's just based on what the revenue that we're projecting, we don't see the ability to be able to fund most of these non-departmentals right now. It's tough to budget money, and then these organizations depend on it, and if it's not there, it's going to be very difficult for the town to say the money's not there. So I think we have to be very realistic on.
But we can't give away money that we don't
Yeah,
have.
it's right. Yeah.
One thing I'd like to point out on the Southwest Virginia Feeding America, they do have some really good, nice donors that help them out. And like you were saying, Donna, the other facilities have to buy the food at a reduced price. So
Right.
they do kind of get compensation. Although I love to fund them as well, they help a lot of people.
Right.
But the difference in Meals on Wheels, if I could explain that, is let's say we gave them $5,000. They have 190 homebound residents, and they receive 2 hot meals and 2 cold meals a week. That costs about $20 per week per person. That would be like an equivalent to $3,800 per week on the low end. And let me explain that the only source in Abingdon and Washington County of the Meals on Wheels program, it's approved and licensed to deliver to homebound, terminally ill, disabled, handicapped, disabled veterans, and low-income seniors. They do have to follow some stringent guidelines with the health department and regulate the temperatures and packaging for the food. So they're the only licensed delivery to homebound people. And I just want to make that clear, it's not easy for homebound people to they can't get out. They can't, and this is just a fund for them. 190 people, that's quite a number. So.
Well, I mean, this decision is the council's decision ultimately on what to do with the allocations of the non-departmentals. I just telling you what you have based on the numbers, what it looks like as far as the projections are concerned, so.
Did you say the District 3, they sponsored the Meals on Wheels also?
Well, District 3 has the Meals on Wheels program, and they do provide meals in Washington County and in Abingdon. Their main central office is out of Marion, but their program is still running, just like the community center. They do have to stick to the criteria of the USDA criteria of, income level and age.
So they
So-
come all the way down from Marion?
Well, they have a satellite, they have a presence here in Abingdon, I don't know where, but yeah, they deliver, the Meals on Wheels program covers, District 3 is really the cooperative, it's not just for transportation, they provide senior services, they're the state agency that provides senior services for this region. And yeah, they provide Meals on Wheels, that's the USDA-funded Meals on Wheels program.
When did you learn about that?
I thought,
They've always
They've
been
always
on
done
that
it.
board,
They always
they've
have.
always had a Meals on Wheels.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've not ever heard that. I wish
Yeah.
that somebody had told me.
I wasn't aware that they operated in Washington County
Yeah,
myself.
do they operate in Washington County?
they don't have a physical, like a main office in Washington County, but their district covers.
But what I mean
you know-
is they come down here from Marion and deliver the, I
Yeah,
wasn't
they
aware
deliver.
of that.
I can get you the numbers of their deliveries on who they deliver to, but
Portions of Washington County are within a stone's throw of District
yeah, I
3.
mean, and they also buy product from like Feed Southwest Virginia or Feeding America as well.
Do you know how many people benefit from that?
No, I don't.
I can provide you that information.
Yeah,
I think
you can
I
give
have a
us
number that I got in a while
information.
back from their
Thank
executive,
you.
or from their coordinator, their project coordinator. I thought I might have forwarded it on to everybody, but I don't know
So
if I
District 3
did.
is also, you know, like you just said, like the buses as well?
Yeah, that's,
So,
Yeah.
so when we give the money to them, does that just cover the buses only?
yeah, it does.
Transportation?
Yeah. Yeah, and they didn't ask for money for the Meals on Wheels program. They do get funding coming down from,
Do they get federal funding for that?
yes, they do. They have to, that's why they have to follow criteria for, if you go to their website, you can actually see who's eligible for the Meals on Wheels program. It has to follow certain guidelines, so they just can't open it up to, and so there is a smaller number of people, I think, that they're serving because there's guidelines attached to that federal funding. It does ultimately flow through the state, but the source is federal funds, USDA.
It has all sorts of programs for seniors, transportation, farmers market, all kinds of things throughout the whole region, and we're included in that region.
Yeah, I will get information
Get
on
get
that
us some more
number.
information.
And
I
so
will.
Meals on Wheels in Abingdon, that service the Washington County and Abingdon, Virginia, they don't get federal funding, to
No.
my understanding?
No.
No, they
No.
don't.
Well, they haven't presented what we've asked for, the Meals on Wheels here as a
really?
finance committee.
What
We
did you
had,
ask for?
just the reports, financial reports, and just some,
We don't have a current
Yeah.
fiscal year
We
audit
don't
for
have
the,
any.
or a more recent fiscal year audit.
just,
We have one from 2 years ago, but we don't have a current one. And I know they had some change in personnel, and that was,
yeah.
but I believe the consensus was in the finance committee that we wanted to see,
Well,
more recent.
made that
We have
rule for
requested that.
everyone, that they
Yeah,
present this, and they did
Yeah.
present.
So they didn't present it,
No.
have you been in contact
Yeah.
with them?
Yeah.
yeah. The most recent one we have is 2018, yeah.
Did they provide the reason why they didn't?
Yes, they did,
Okay,
yeah.
I guess we can't say that here.
No.
Okay.
They gave us a reason, yeah. Okay, I will conclude, and Stephanie's been really quiet, so either I've been talking way too fast and haven't paused enough, or I did a really good, or I did a really good job and she didn't have to chime in and correct me on anything.
That's exactly what it was.
Oh, right, yeah. So, obviously, town council will conduct a public hearing and then have some discussion afterwards. I expect there could be a few more things that come up between now and June 15th, so I'll turn it over to the council if they have any final questions, or, Mayor.
Any questions, council?
I'd just like to say thank you.
Al has one.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you can hear me, I'd like that. Jimmy, at the beginning of your presentation, thank you very much. You discussed the $5 million fund balance that we so judiciously, jealously hang on to.
Right.
Do we know how long that would sustain the town in the event we need to use it?
Stephanie.
Mr. Rose in one of his presentations.
Whoa, feedback.
Suggested that amount, and that
Yeah.
it's based on a fundamental,
Yeah.
analysis, and for what period of time, and I cannot remember what period of time it was.
When we were doing.
Jimmy, would you like me to jump in?
Yeah, why don't you jump in, because we have those numbers. We're getting a lot of feedback, so I don't know what's going on, but maybe Floyd can look at it. Yeah, go ahead and talk, Stephanie. Maybe he muted him because we were having feedback issues.
Everything got real quiet.
Yes, it did. I found
They sound like Darth
Sound
Vader.
like they're sick.
Luke,
Cutler
I am your
Jones.
father.
maybe Floyd needs to fix it. Yeah.
I can hear you, Steph.
I know, I can
Yeah.
hear you too, Mr. Bradley.
You know the answer to my question.
I do know the answer.
Well, why don't you two call each other then, and then Stephanie can text me the answer.
You have about 6 months.
I was gonna say 6 months at least. Yeah.
of Coverage for expenditures When you add in all the other funds, you probably have 3 to 4 months to cover you, which is very good. What we'll do, can you stop?
This is important.
Well, I don't know, I do know that what Stephanie said was we do have a minimum of 6 months. That $5 million does provide us with a minimum of 6 months.
It's a delay.
We got to cut off the audio.
Does Floyd know what's going on? I guess he
Yeah.
does.
I think there's two mics there.
Okay, turn my mic off.
Or computer mic on the.
I'm muted though. Oh, turn my WebEx. Okay. Here, you do it. Show me where. Oh wait, yeah, here we go. I have it off. I have them both off.
I turned the volume down.
Hey, do they need to mute theirs?
Is that better?
We don't hear anything, but they probably need to mute theirs. I don't know if we're gonna get that. And then I'm talking, and then it's like delaying.
Ask Stephanie to talk.
I'm here. Ask Stephanie to talk.
It's an echo.
Hey, it could be a lot worse. There's some pretty bad horror stories about video teleconferences and council meeting. Yeah, we might get hacked.
Ask her to talk now.
Stephanie, talk now.
Is she muted? We're not hearing it at all.
Okay.
We're not getting any sound off this TV. Come on, dude. I don't know why all of a sudden it decided to go haywire on us,
Oh, no, that's really high.
but we're still not getting there.
It's gonna kill our hearing.
Hang on.
We'll get past it.
Lock that one back in on the deck.
Should I just sign out, Floyd, since I?
Yeah, you can.
Yeah, let me just go ahead and get out of here, and that way. Let's see here. Yeah, so I just left the meeting.
It's gonna take me a minute to get back in there.
Hi, Stephanie.
It's a good point for recess anyways.
Yeah, I need to run to the restroom.
It's been almost 2 hours.
Are we okay to run to the restroom?
Y'all want to take a recess?
Yeah.
Yeah, let's just do that. Yeah, I think it's a good idea. I need some oxygen.
That sounds great.
I can get you some.
Can you get me some? Oh, man. I can. You want me to? I don't know. She's not. somebody want to go get me a milkshake from Pal's?
No,
I would
Jimmy,
love to.
we don't want to get you off your diet.
That's true. I've been doing so good.
I definitely would have done that if you'd told me before your budget presentation started.
Cam, how's the BVU going?
Good. Phil's well into his 2 Little Creek and Beaver Creek projects, and they just bought some property downtown to put the storage tank on.
Oh,
Because
really?
of overflow.
Floyd, do you want me to restart?
I've got it. Jimmy, will you mute your microphone, please?
I signed up. I signed up. Or you want to mute this microphone? I'm off. My bad.
Hang on.
Yeah, we've got 2 meetings going. I just muted myself.
Okay.
We're picking up from somebody.
Answer it, but then I was like, I
Did you log back in?
give a more detailed answer.
I'm muted here.
Okay, all right. You're smart. Okay.
Just mute that.
It is muted. You mean kill the volume as well?
No. Okay, hold on, let me mute this one.
Okay.
Yeah. You're an icicle. John's an icicle.
That's good. It's like a hospital in here. That's good.
Frostbite.
All right.
You can always layer, John.
Cam, what's your overall plan? Are they going to use,
Stephanie, will you
Okay,
speak?
y'all are still online.
Electrophone.
All right, we've got sound. We're up.
Okay,
We're up.
everybody, you are still online.
We're still online.
I will mute it.
No, that's okay. Okay, that's fine. Yeah, it's good to mute it. If we're on a recess.
At this point, we can see and hear and speak to Stephanie, is that correct?
Hello.
All right, good. Okay, great.
So, all right, thanks.
Tell her we're gonna mute everything and.
We're gonna mute everything until we continue the recess, or until we reconvene.
Floyd, would you like for me to mute this meeting out here?
Yeah.
Okay.
Tell us when we're live. Okay.
Did Al get his question answered? Do you all know?
I don't know if it was audible or not. Let's just go back, and the question was,
Yes, Mayor, I got one.
He said he did.
okay, all right. That's all I have, Mayor, unless there's any other
Okay, are
questions.
there any other questions, Council?
Well, the question I think she answered for him, it might be important for all of us to hear is
Okay, I thought everybody,
why we have to maintain a $5 million balance,
For the,
reserve.
No, I think he was saying how long will it last?
How long
Oh,
will it
okay,
last?
How long will it
okay,
Yeah.
last? Not why, but how long.
okay.
the reason,
Okay.
the reason we have to maintain it is because of that AAA.
I knew that.
the bond rating is one, but it's also
Almost
good to
70,
keep,
yeah.
I mean, having a minimum of 6 months reserve, especially,
That's right.
is
Cash
very
flow, too.
desirable.
Well, it's used for cash flow, too.
Yeah,
Cash flow.
yeah.
All right, any other questions, Council?
Well, I do have a couple questions. Are we gonna review the Meadows budget we just got today?
That is going to go out to bid in a couple weeks. That is,
Well, that's
something
not-
that
that's
staff-
not on the agenda for
No.
tonight, no.
But is it in the budget? I mean, it's in the budget, isn't it?
in the budget, I mean, I just thought, I mean, we didn't,
We just got it today, and that's a few things that's why I was asking, when are we gonna have more time to discuss this? in a little
well, the
bit more
project's
depth?
moving forward, so I don't know what you would want to change in the budget detail, but, I mean, we have, John, his staff, and the consulting engineers, we've reviewed it at the Recreation Advisory Committee, but as far as, are you talking about like removing items from the,
How about let's do it this way?
Yeah.
What were the luxury items that were taken out, and what were
do you want to talk about that, John?
and what were the?
I know, I hate to put you on the spot, but there were some items that were taken out that we went through at the rec, unless you want to talk about it, Derek, at the,
And what is it, the accessories you said, Mr. Webb? What
It-
were those, what were taken out of that budget?
remember when we met?
Well, I mean,
Yeah.
have we actually taken anything out yet, or do we just all to add everything?
Necessarily, we had
Yeah.
discussions at the Recreation Advisory Committee meeting about what items could be potentially taken out or structured in the bid.
Right.
Where it's an ad alternate.
That's right.
It gives some flexibility then,
Right.
once we get bids, that if it's over budget, we can pull some items out.
Right.
If it's not over budget, we might have the potential to do the entire project that we hope to do. A couple of the bigger ones, Ms. Patterson, that was discussed was the concession stand for the multi-use field.
Yeah, I'm going to give John the microphone.
Okay. The overall project, the original design and concept included concession stand for both the baseball quad and a smaller concession stand and restroom facility over at the multi-use field on the north end of the complex. So during that one meeting, there was a discussion about, well, if we did need to reduce costs or cut costs, could we potentially remove the concession stand at the multi-use field, maybe build it at a later date when funds became available. Another possibility that we discussed was to hold off on installing the lighting for the multi-use fields. The discussion was that typically the baseball fields are used more at night than soccer or multi-use fields. So there was a discussion about running conduit and electrical infrastructure to make it possible in the future, but hold off on the light installation until funds are available. But again, the way we are putting the package together, or where the designer is, that he's producing plan sets and bid documents for the entire project, and that way that we can make a decision after the bids are turned in to match actual cost as bid with funding that we have.
So, John, to answer her question completely, you haven't taken anything out of the project, is that right?
We haven't eliminated anything from
Okay, so
the
you're just
project
bidding it
scope.
So you can, and estimating doesn't really mean anything.
Till we get fixed numbers.
Right,
We gotta
right.
get fixed
Well, we added
numbers.
them
That's
as
just
an
part of
alternate,
the-
what we did.
Yeah.
Right, that's
Well,
part of the,
reason I was confused, if you will,
Yeah.
is because of the paper that they quoted you,
Yeah.
that you said you took out the luxury items, so that was.
That's what I was, some of what I was referring to, and I guess to rephrase what John has said, by segregating those additional items and putting them and removing them from the base bid, we're gonna get an alternate bid. He is right. We could get a really great bid, and we could have a contractor that would give us a very competitive price, and we might be able to accomplish those, but realistically,
Right. But realistically, those items that were we felt were luxuries, one of which was the soccer fields, the multipurpose fields lighting, we felt like that wasn't a necessity to keep in the project. Will we still necessarily bid it? Sure, we can put it as an alternate bid, but those were one of the two major items in addition to the concession stand, that, which he mentioned, that we removed out of the base bid, but we are still technically going to bid it.
What did you say,
Correct.
Mr. Kane?
Correct.
I didn't hear you.
Correct.
Mr. Bell?
The line item in the town's budget is still $7.5 million, which does account for the additional $2 million that we would be seeking. We might be able to get all that for that price, but we're not sure, which is why we put it in as an alternate. We have to be very careful to come up with too many alternates. It does scare away bidders. We've had these discussions. We want to make sure that we have enough in the base bid that makes it attractive, but
but also have the flexibility.
Yeah.
When the bid's turned in, to be able to match
right.
the project with the funds available.
Yeah. So to correct my previous statement, or to clarify my previous statement, technically on paper, they haven't been eliminated. They've just been removed from the scope of work on the base bid. So, okay, does that accurately represent everything?
So-
Okay.
Based on, your report, we were supposed to be getting these design plans by March 18th. So here we are in May. So
We
just got this,
We just got the plans from the
Friday.
engineers on Friday.
and we just got this today. And this is the.
That's just a breakdown
complex
of,
Cost estimate.
that's just a breakdown that the engineers are using for line items for the project, yeah. I just thought it would be something that you guys would want to see.
Well,
Yeah.
there's a rumor going around, and I just wanted to
Okay.
satisfy that rumor.
Sure, no problem. Yeah.
Okay, any other questions, council?
Yeah, I have another question, Mayor. I have, based on the budget and the balancing of this budget, we need to also let the public know that this is based on selling the Hassinger House, which is the visitor center, at $600,000. Is that correct, Mr. Randy?
We do have the Hassinger House budgeted to be, we're in the projected revenue to be sold. I was told when I first came on that was a facility or a property that the town wanted to sell. They had sold the Summers Law Office, that was the first piece. This was another piece they wanted to sell. Yeah, if we didn't have that in the budget, then we'd probably just have to be making, potentially some more cuts. It is,
Plus, it was appraised also.
yeah, we did have an appraisal, so, yeah, but that's accurate. I mean, that is a revenue
Well,
item
we
in the
have
budget.
other, we can have other properties as well if we have to. I mean.
You mean sell other
some
properties?
other properties.
Sure.
There's some, like Sapo Lane.
Yes, that's another one we talked about. We have had that property appraised, and there is some challenges for access there. There's no direct public access. Tanya and I have talked about it, and based on the current economic situations, we don't know if it's in the best interest for the town to list that property for sale right now, but we can, but it will probably not bring in as much as we thought at first.
Also, we've got
Yeah.
several parcels at the tech park, and they're about roughly, we don't have any appraisals on them, but it's over $2 million worth right there. I did have a question about Campbell subdivision, 12.5 acres. Does anybody know where that's located?
Campbell subdivision, I don't know.
That one's 12.5 acres. I don't have the.
I don't know if
amount
it's
of
just
money.
a,
That was
if it's just an open green space maybe for, I don't know,
It's on our,
list of properties
the
that we own.
tax properties that we own. Campbell subdivision. I don't know. I'll have to go do some research on that. And the last question I had, unless y'all have any questions about those properties. Anybody? No? $80,000 for our zoning ordinances. Can we kind of push that forward a little bit? They've been out of date for a good while.
We are planning on doing it this fiscal year. We didn't have the funds budgeted. We had a small amount budgeted this fiscal year and not enough to do. We've actually already gotten a start on the code updates by doing an analysis, a diagnostic, which we had funds available in this year's budget to do it. But it's going to be it was a pretty expensive undertaking, so that's why it had to be budgeted in this coming budget. We don't have the funds in the current fiscal year budget to start that project.
Well, we didn't plan to do the whole.
That's true, we didn't. We just did, we plan to do the sign code.
We got the sign ordinance done, didn't we?
It is currently under review right now. Yes,
Okay.
yes, it is.
And we worked it.
Yes,
Okay.
yeah, what was budgeted was, you're correct, it was just the sign code is what the council previously budgeted for, the town code update. We did have to take some other funds to try to complete that because we wanted to do the diagnostic along with that before we did the sign code. But to make a long story short, the sign code is currently under review right now by planning and legal. I think actually you guys have already reviewed it. I think they've provided some comment back to the consultant. Yeah. The zoning and the subdivision code are much more extensive updates. They involve a lot of discussions with staff, with the council when we get to a certain step where we're bringing those to the council about some policy decisions that we would need to incorporate into that those new codes, public hearings at some point. So that's going to take, we've got the comp plan update that's going to be completed sometime this year. We had to delay it because of some, obviously, the COVID. But it'll be nice to be able to have at the end of the next fiscal year an updated comp plan, an updating zoning code, an updated subdivision code, and that's the plan. So.
The planning commission, six or everything fell. We're working on it.
Yeah. Okay. We heard the last part. It says we're working on it.
Yeah.
It's got a little piece of that. So.
All right, council, any other questions? Okay, for no other questions, I declare the public hearing open.
I don't think we had. Kim, you said we didn't have anybody for the public hearing. I think
Nobody out there?
I think they spoke at the beginning.
No one is here, so I declare the public hearing closed. The question now is, shall the proposal be rejected? There's a resolution in your packet. That's the first reading of the ordinance. I'm sure everybody has read that.
Yes, Mayor, it should be rejected.
Okay, one council member says it should be rejected, so the question is before us. So Kim, would you call the roll, please? The question is, shall the proposal be rejected?
Mr. Bradley?
Yes.
Ms. Quetch?
No.
Mr. Webb?
No.
Ms. Patterson?
Yes.
Mayor Craig?
No. Okay, moving along to the next item. Considerations of bids. We have bids on the Russell Road crosswalk. John, do.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of council. Jimmy mentioned this project before. Just a brief history of it, very brief history. In February 19, the town entered into an agreement with the Virginia Department of Transportation to build a signalized crosswalk where the existing crosswalk is there, Russell Road near the ball fields. We got to the point where on May 8th, we received 2 bids from contractors on this project, from Inland Construction and Kins Construction. The low bidder at the time of the bid opening was Kins Construction of Lebanon, Virginia, in the amount of $48,075.20. So I'm here before you tonight to request authorization for the town manager to enter into a contract with Kins Construction for this project after we get approval from VDOT for the bid results. I consider that to be a formality. We did check the bid results, and both bidders were responsive and turned in the appropriate paperwork at the bid time. So I'm asking for your authorization to move forward with this project. I think Jimmy mentioned earlier, this one is 100% funded from VDOT through their Highway Safety Improvement Program. If there's any questions, I'd be glad to
Just
answer
May the
that.
8th, 2020 is when you got to
Yes,
say
the
that?
bids were turned in May 8th.
2020.
Isn't that significantly less than we thought it was gonna cost, or is that just my imagination?
It's a good bid, and we've talked about this climate that we're in right now may be conducive to getting good bids. This is an example. The two bids, the low bid was $48,000 and some change. The second bid was $69,000. The engineer's estimate was $74,000. So this was a good, very good bid. So excited to get this project done.
I am tickled.
Good.
Thank you, John.
Okay, council, any questions?
No, but thanks for what you do.
All right, you're welcome.
All right, council, what's your pleasure on the bids?
I move
I
that we,
move award-
go ahead, Al.
I move we award.
And I'll second that.
I was getting ready to, but okay.
Al, you breaking up,
I think he said award the contract. I think that's all he said.
I think you said you,
Award the contract to Ken's Construction.
okay, I'm gonna repeat the motion, Al, if best I understand it. There's a motion by Mr. Bradley to award the contract to Heath Construction, or,
Ken's
Yes.
Construction. Ken's Construction.
okay, Ken Construction, and authorize the town manager to sign any and all documents there pertaining thereto. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Webb. Any discussion? Kim, call a roll, please.
Mr. Bradley,
Yes.
One word at a time, we'll get it all.
You didn't break up on that, Al.
Ms. Quetch,
Aye.
Mr. Webb,
Aye.
Ms. Patterson,
Aye.
and Mayor Craig.
Aye. Okay, reports from the town manager. Jimmy, I think you've got some report to make there.
Yeah, I do. Is that normal right there? Oh, did we change it on this?
Okay. Couple things I wanted to update everybody on. Number one was the sports complex. I did state earlier that we did receive the construction or the bid document ready plans on Friday from CHA, and staff, particularly John and Tyler, will be reviewing those and providing feedback to the consulting engineers with the hope of having a bid in early June, at least to be able to go out to bid, that is. I wanted to talk about the building opening soon. We are planning or hopeful to be able to open Town Hall and the police department sometime next week. The thought was, with the election being here, with this meeting here tonight, the election here tomorrow, and then they're not going to come in and pick up the equipment until Wednesday. It just gives us a couple days to get things clean and wiped down, and so are hopeful that we'll put an announcement out stating that the day after Memorial Day, these two facilities, Town Hall and the police department, will be open to the public, and we'll just put some guidelines up as things are reopening. I think it's probably appropriate that we do that. One last bit of information just came in. Kevin Worley just sent an email. I don't know if he sent it to you too, John, but it looks like the Plum Alley will be canceled this year. The board of directors had made a decision they had moved it once, but they just decided to go ahead and cancel it. So I thought just might want to pass that along tonight since it was new information that I just got. So, and that's all I have, Mayor.
Okay, thank you. The next item is passage of resolutions. We have a resolution to consider VDOT request for permanent easement over a portion of the Virginia Creeper Trail right-of-way parallel to Drowning Road, approximately 700 feet north of the existing intersection of Route 58 and Virginia Creeper Trail right-of-way. VDOT seeks this easement for construction and maintenance of two new bridges to be constructed along the proposed alignment. John D.
I don't know what else I need to add to that, but this issue's been brought to you all.
I just read what you gave me.
I know, yeah.
You did a good job.
Thank you very much, Mayor. Appreciate that. But this issue's been before the council several times recently, so we've had a lot of discussion about it. Mr. Bell spent a lot of time working with VDOT's counsel and the Office of Attorney General, I guess, to get the language right or in the town's best interest, and I think we're there now. And if you have any questions, I'd be glad to try to address them. But basically, I think we're to the point of being able to sign that document.
Okay, any questions, council?
Anything to add?
Any questions,
Ken?
Al?
Okay.
No, I'm good.
You approve it, is that what you said?
Yes.
What did you say?
He said he moves to approve it.
Oh, motion by
And I'll
Mr. Bradley
second that.
to approve the resolution.
Oh, he needs to state it? Okay.
Need to state the whole thing.
Motion by Mr. Bradley to approve the resolution, second by Vice Mayor Patterson. Any discussion? Kim, call the roll, please.
Mr. Bradley?
Yes.
Ms. Quetch?
Aye.
Mr. Webb?
Aye.
Ms. Patterson?
Aye.
Mayor Craig?
Aye. The next item is second amended resolution to suspend disconnection of water and/or sewer service effective from the date of its passage until May 31st, 2020 to customer due to non-payment. Mr. Moran.
Mr. Mayor, Council, this is just an extension really of the deadline from the last resolution that we adopted. This would just take us through the end of this month, since that's when disconnects would usually occur for non-payment. I'm going to be communicating with the Service Authority to see where I want to kind of coordinate with them and to see how far off they've determined they are going to be following this practice. So we'll kind of wait and see what happens. I think this is appropriate for this month to continue the suspension of the disconnections for at least another month. So that's my recommendation. So.
Okay, council, what's your pleasure?
I'd like to make a motion that we go ahead and do a second amended resolution to suspend disconnection of water and sewer service effective from the date of its passing until May 31st, 2020 to any customer due to non-payment.
Motion by Ms. Patterson. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second.
Second by Mr. Bradley. Any discussion?
Can we extend?
Oh, I'm sorry, I thought he was seconding the motion. We're just not,
He said,
he probably wants to know if he can extend it further.
The thought, we can, it's up to the council, they'd have to amend the resolution, but I think we were just gonna look at it on a month-to-month basis, but I'll do whatever the council, whatever the council wants to do, and it's your decision, so. But,
I kind of think the point I was making is that we're not extending it very long, so why don't we just?
well, technically, we're extending it a full another month of disconnects, because
okay.
that's why we're doing it now. What's in June, we would be extending it, because we don't do the disconnects until the end of the month.
Okay.
So it's not like, it's really gonna last 30 days. You see what I'm saying? Yeah.
Can we?
Did you hear that, Al?
Yes.
Okay, are you all right with that, or?
Yes.
Okay, all right.
Okay, so we had a motion by Mr. Patterson and seconded by Derek Webb. Any discussion? Kim, call roll, please.
Mr. Bradley?
Yes.
Ms. Quetch?
Aye.
Mr. Webb?
Aye.
Ms. Patterson?
Aye.
Mayor Craig?
Aye. Okay, second reading of ordinances, or of an ordinance, amendment to Part 2, Code, Chapter 2, Administration, Article 7, Planning Commission, Powers and Duties, Section 2-326, Town Provisions, Subsection B, Composition, Qualifications, and Appointment of Members. Mr. Moran.
Yes, this is just the ordinance that removes the town manager from the planning commission. And I expect that we'll be in a position to, since this ordinance would become effective immediately, we're not worried about any quorum issues with the next meeting being held electronically. But I hope that we'll be able to get a couple applicants by the June 15th meeting and be able to make an appointment for my replacement, so.
Okay, council, what's your pleasure?
So moved.
Motion by
Second that.
Mr. Webb to approve the ordinance, second by Ms. Quetch. Any discussion? Kim, call the roll, please.
Mr. Bradley?
Aye.
Ms. Quetch?
Aye.
Mr. Webb?
Aye.
Ms. Patterson?
Aye.
Mayor Craig?
The next item on the agenda is consideration of date and time for the July organizational / regular meeting. Mr. Moran.
Yes, in consultation with Mr. Bell, in review of the town charter, it's my understanding, I know that we've in the past had meetings on July 1st. I had discussed that with Mr. Bell and asked if it was necessary to have it, on July 1st. Not that I'm opposed to having it, I just don't think we'd need to do it like at 7 in the morning. I don't know if that's necessary. I know it's technically the opening of business and, before the first of the month, but the charter does say that we will perform the assignments or the reorganization at the first regular meeting of July, or it specifically says July or after the end of the terms, or does it say July specifically? I think it says July. Okay. So I just recommended that we just have it on, I think we're going to need to go back to 2 meetings in July. And so if that's the case, then our normal meeting would fall on July 6th, which is the first Monday. And unless there's any objections, I'd say we just do it at that meeting. But and then have we'll have the committee meeting on the 20th, or the work session on the 20th. So, but I think if we do want to do it on the 1st, I think we just do it in the evening and not do it, not during business. In the morning, it's not convenient for the public, so.
I wonder if a lot of people will be out of town long weekend,
Oh.
July 4th.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Yeah, well, I didn't think about that. I told the mayor that I got no issues with July 1st. Just let's do it. If we're going to do it, let's do it in the evening and not do it like at 7 in the morning.
Either, I'm just saying.
No, that's a good point. Yeah, I didn't think about that. Yeah.
That's a good point. I'll say July.
Yeah, you want to do it July 1st then? I'm okay with that, Mayor, if Cindy, are you guys good with July 1st? Okay.
Sorry.
Yeah. Okay, so that means we'll still continue to do the work session on the 20th, if that's okay with everybody.
Can I check my calendar, please?
I'm sorry, the week of the 20th. We don't always do it that third Monday. I'm sorry. We could deal with that at the next meeting. We don't have to set that date now. So was thinking Mondays, but you're right. Okay, next regular meeting will be.
Clear, we're meeting on July the 1st at 6:30 at our normal time.
That's what you'd like. If you'd like to meet on the 1st, I recommend we do it in the evening to make it convenient for not only the council members, but for the public. Yeah.
Okay. All right, we have an item on the agenda, appointment of, we have a vacancy on the planning commission and the building code committee. We don't have any applications, so I suggest we carry this over until the next meeting. We're not going to have a close meeting for no reason. So, okay. With council's permission, I'm adjourning the meeting.
All right.
What about council reports?
Oh, I'm sorry, I skipped over that. Go ahead.
Anybody have any council reports?
Go ahead.
You go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
All right.
I got to write I found that we needed to talk to our delegates and senators about some of the money that the government was going to give for COVID-19 pandemic. So I did write a letter to all the delegates in this area and the senators and Mr. Griffith, asking for funds for not only Abingdon but our surrounding neighbors, Washington County, the Damascus, Meadowview, Glade Spring as well. So hopefully we'll get some of that COVID-19 distribution.
Okay. Any other reports? We're adjourned.
Was texting me, Eleanor tore something up. That's what she
Kim,
said.
do you have anything for me to say?
Yes, if you're up to it.
Your dad live in Downstream? Yeah, absolutely. I'm gonna run you.
Really?